My parents refused to attend my wedding and attempted to have it cancelled after I refused to move the date for my sister's vacation. I'm Emily Lawson, and I'm 31 years old. And because I wouldn't move the date to accommodate my sister's Bali vacation, my parents boycotted my wedding on the 15th of November 2026, which I had prepared for months with 250 guests. They never even arrived. There were still 2 vacant seats in the front row. Everyone saw it. Everyone understood. They kept their word when my father told me bluntly before that, if you don't change the wedding date, don't expect us to be there. We're going to teach you a lesson. Even before the ceremony started, there were whispers. Despite their best efforts to appear normal, their absence created an unavoidable void. They didn't know about David, my husband. What he had found was unknown to them. And at 8:23 p.m., they most certainly were unaware of that. At our reception that evening, he would take the stage and tell everyone their one thing. My parents definitely didn't want anyone to know one thing. That's when everything went wrong. And by everything, I mean their business, their reputation, and their hold on my life. This is what took place. Like all good stories, it began with hope. 17 December 2023. At Austin's Zilker Park, David asked me to marry him. It was straightforward and ideal. A ring his grandmother had worn for 60 years, string lights he had strung himself, and a blanket beneath the oak trees. I felt like the luckiest woman alive when I said yes. I called my parents the following morning. My mother cried. Happy tears, I thought. My dad spoke in a kind, almost arrogant tone. He added to Emily, we're so happy for you. We'll help however we can. I should have recorded that call. I should have saved it, but I didn't know I'd need proof of kindness yet. My mother brought it up during lunch at their Westlake Hills home a week later. The mansion I grew up in was the epitome of success, with its marble countertops and towering ceilings. Brandon Hayes, my father, is the owner of 3 auto dealerships in Austin. Honda, Toyota, and so forth. They're comfortable, but they're not billionaires. Really cozy. A net worth of approximately $5 million. Lauren, my mother, smiled at me and put down her wine glass. Your grandparents left you something for your wedding, Emily, my dear. I blinked. What are you saying? The trust fund, she said like it was obvious. They set aside funds especially for this when their grandparents went away in 2019. $150,000 for the marriage of their first grandchild. My throat constricted. That's who I am. Yes, dear, you are that. Tears pricked my eyes. It had been nearly 5 years since my grandparents' departure. However, I felt them then, felt their love reaching forward through time. This was what they wanted for me. They had anticipated it. From the other side of the table, my father said, we'll make sure you have a beautiful wedding. His tone was firm even though he was hardly glancing up as he browsed through his phone. The first grandchild to be married is you. You own that money. I gave my mom a hug. I gave my dad a thank you. By April 2024, David and I had visited 13 wedding venues. I left that house with the thought, for once they see me. For once, I'm the priority. I should have known better. We were worn out. The majority were either completely booked, extremely expensive, or simply incorrect. Then we found Barton Creek Resort and Spa, the Overlook Pavilion, outdoor string lights, hill country views, capacity for 250 guests. I sensed it when I walked in. It was here. I said, well, take it, to Jenna Carter, the coordinator, a kind-eyed, 40-something lady with a leather planner. Leven belas November 200W a num. Jenna grinned. Excellent. That's 20 months away. You made a wise reservation in advance. Here, fall weddings go by quickly. $10,000 was the non-refundable deposit. David and I split it from our savings. The contract was signed on April 3, 2024. I sent a picture of the pavilion to my folks via text. In a matter of minutes, my mother responded. The location is gorgeous, darling. November 15th is ideal. Gorgeous pictures in the fall weather. We are so excited to honor you. That text was saved by me. At the moment, I was unsure of why. Perhaps I had a premonition of the impending storm. Despite being 28 years old and 3 years younger than me, my sister Rachel is treated like royalty by my parents. She influences people's lifestyles. Rachel Luck's Life has 156,000 Instagram followers. She shares pictures of wellness retreats, cafes in Europe, and sunsets in Bali. Stuff that gives you the impression that your life is dull. She has never held a legitimate job. Everything is paid for by my parents. Trips, cars, and rent. It's referred to as supporting her dreams. I refer to it as enabling. Rachel attended art camp in Santa Fe, took ballet and piano classes, and more as a child. Emily, you're so self-sufficient that you don't require assistance. My father remarked, that's good, honey. And returned to watching football once I graduated with honors from college. My parents had a dinner party when Rachel shared her first Instagram reel, which received 10,000 views. I discovered early on that I wasn't the best kid. I was the trustworthy one, the one who would be all right. My father mentioned something around Thanksgiving 2019, shortly after my grandparents passed away, and I will never forget it. Rachel was discussing her plans to become an influencer while we were seated around the table. This spark was in my father's eyes as he gazed at her. Rachel will do something significant. He stared at me after saying, "She's got that spark. You're stable, Emily. Steady does well. You'll be all right." All right. For years, the word dog-dated me. However, I no longer required their approval. David was mine. I had a fulfilling career, coordinator of a youth mentoring nonprofit program. I lived my own life, or so I believed. Rachel shared an Instagram story in June 2025 that left me feeling nauseous. A video shows her squealing and jumping on her bed. My mother then texted me on the 15th of July 2025, 3 months before my wedding, with the comment, "Just booked the opportunity of a lifetime, Bali, here I come. Some things are just meant to be." I didn't think much of it. Rachel was always going somewhere. Give me a call to discuss the date. I was working. I went outside into the heat of Texas. I put the phone to my ear. "Hello, Mom. What is going on?" She spoke in a strained voice. "It concerns the date of your wedding. How about it?" Rachel made travel arrangements to Bali for a wellness retreat. She has a great opportunity. She will be producing content and networking with well-known brands. There is no reimbursement. My chest constricted. "All right, what time is it?" "From November 12 to November 26. Quiet. That's my wedding, Mom." "I understand, my love. That is the reason for my call. Is it possible to move it? Perhaps next year in December, or perhaps the spring?" The parking lot caught my attention. The asphalt shimmered in a heat wave. "We reserved the space 20 months ago, Mom. In May, we distributed save the dates to 250 individuals. The contract for the venue is signed. They're altering my dress. It's all locked in." "I get it, but Rachel needs to know about this. The cost of this excursion was $20,000. Emily, that money is lost if she cancels. $20,000 to take a trip. I had saved for my wedding for 5 years. I had scraped together $60,000 with David. Every dollar matters." Additionally, they requested that I discard everything for Rachel's Instagram posts. There was a silence when I said, "I'm not changing the date." Then my mom's voice became icy. "This has to do with family, Emily. Rachel's career is flourishing. Your wedding can take place at any time. Mom, we have a contract. Thousands of dollars would be lost." "The location," she said, "I'll give you a call back," and hung up. I felt the first break in my universe as I stood there in the heat with my phone in my hand. My father called 2 days later. This time, his voice was cold. When a deal was going bad at the dealership, that was the voice he employed. "This has to do with family, Emily. Rachel's work is significant. She is networking with large brands while in Bali. Your wedding can take place at any time. You're being self-centered." Selfish. It was a slap of a word. "We signed a contract, Dad." "The location." "Emily, it's not about the money, it's respect." I held my voice steady even though I wanted to shout, "The date will not be altered." He gave a quick breath. "After then, we have an issue." He ended the call. I was trembling as I stood in my flat. After seeing my face, David entered the room and drew me into his embrace. "What was it he said?" David inquired. "He referred to me as self-centered." David squeezed me closer. "You're not self-centered. You are defending yourself. There is a distinction." I wanted to think he was real. However, there was a part of me that thought I may be mistaken, the part that had spent 31 years trying to win my parents' approval. Perhaps I should simply reschedule. Perhaps I was causing the family to fall apart. I had trouble sleeping that night. My parents insisted on a face-to-face meeting on July 22nd. David and I took a car to their Westlake Hills home. Even though the air conditioner was running nonstop, my palms were sweating. Rachel, who was staying with a friend in Los Angeles, was also present via speakerphone. In the background, I could hear cafe noise. This wasn't even serious to her. With her hands folded, my mother sat across from us. With his arms folded, my father stood by the window. My mother said, "We've come up with a compromise," in a sweet voice. "The wedding is rescheduled for May 2026. The adjustment fees will be partially covered by us. Everyone benefits." I turned to face David. Beneath the table, he gripped my hand. I mentioned that the change fees will range from $12,000 to $15,000. At the very least, we would forfeit our date. We would have to begin anew. My dad looked out the window. "We're willing to assist. What more would you like?" The speakerphone crackled with Rachel's voice. Something snapped inside of me since, after all, I had already paid the deposit for Bali. "No," I stated, "that the date remains." My dad's expression hardened. "After then, we have an issue." 10 minutes later, the meeting came to an end. My mother was sobbing in the entryway as David and I made our way to the car. My dad didn't even give me a glance. My father texted me when I woke up the following morning. 6:52 a.m. is the timestamp. "Don't expect our financial assistance because you have chosen this course. You're alone. Your mom is inconsolable. I hope you feel proud of who you are. The $150,000 that grandma and grandpa left was for a family-focused wedding. This isn't eligible. We'll give you nothing. I read it 3 times. I then showed David. Are they able to achieve that? I inquired. Lawfully. David's mouth clenched. We will find out, but I'm not sure. My parents didn't spoken to me for 47 days. I made 6 calls to my mom. Voicemail. I made 4 calls to my father. Directly to voicemail. I texted. They had seen them, as evidenced by the red receipts. No responses. I sent my mom a text on August 10. Can we discuss? Mom, you are missed. At 2:17 p.m., read. On the 24th of August, no answer. Please, I would love to see you both at the wedding, not read, but delivered. Rachel, meanwhile, prepared for her trip to Bali with 34 Instagram posts. All of them were well received by my parents. They never once acknowledged my wedding countdown posts, instead leaving the comment, "So proud of you, sweetheart, and you deserve this." David saw me go downhill. When I cried, he held me. When I was unable to sleep, he made me tea. And it wasn't until much later that I discovered what he was doing. He dug. My phone rang on September 8. Mom. My heart leaped. Hi there. Not moving. Her voice then became icy. We will attend the wedding, but don't count on us to be pleased. I took a seat on the sofa. Mom, I just wanted to say that I spoke with your father about this. We won't act like this is fine, but we'll be there because family is coming. You put your date before your sister's aspirations. There are repercussions for actions. She hesitated. We won't contribute money or take part in pictures until you apologize to Rachel. Emily, this is to teach you humility. Humility. Now my mother's word, my father's. My intention was to say, you're punishing me for having boundaries. She hung up, and I wanted to respond, this isn't humility. It's control. Instead, I simply answered, okay. I felt more empty than ever as I sat there with my phone in my hand. Jenna Carter, the venue planner, sent me an email 8 days prior to the wedding, on the 10th of October 2026. Subject line, conflicting and urgent directions. I took it open. Hello Emily, I hope all is well with you. I'm contacting you because I've been receiving contradictory information about your event on November 15. Before moving forward, I wanted to have your straight clarification. Please see the emails attached. Tell me how you want me to handle this, please. Regards, Jenna. 3 emails from my mother are attached. First email, the 3rd of September 2025. Hi, this is the bride's mother, Lauren Hayes. We must talk about rescheduling the event for November 15th to 2026. What choices do we have? Kindly give me a call as soon as possible. The 15th of September 2025. Email, 2. I know there are consequences, but this is a family issue, Jenna. You can certainly cooperate with us. We're attempting to shield the bride from her error. Tell me, please. Email 3, the 2nd of October, 2025. This date shouldn't be used for the wedding. As the bride's mother, I'm pleading with you to assist us in avoiding this error. Give me a call now. My blood became icy. She made 3 covert attempts to call off my wedding. I typed the email and sent it to David. She attempted to call off our nuptials. He gave me a call right away. Emma, he murmured in a quiet, steady voice. Tonight, we must speak. I have been engaged in a project. What are you saying? As soon as I come home, I'll explain. But he hesitated. Emily. You underestimate how large this is. David brought his laptop home that evening. I need you to trust me, he said, setting it on the kitchen table and pulling up a chair for me. I do. Good, because I've spent the last 3 weeks digging into your family's finances. I looked up. What? David works for Frostbank as a financial analyst. He would use the research tools that most people do not have access to. When he said, your grandparents' trust fund, the $150,000, I wanted to know if your parents could really refuse to give it to you. And he turned the laptop screen toward me. Account ledgers, bank statements, and highlighted entries. The trust fund was worth $150,000 as of January 2025. That's precisely what your grandparents left behind. I gave a note. On the 18th of July 2025, a withdrawal occurred. $90,000. I felt sick to my stomach. What? To go to the next page, he clicked. Rachel R. Hayes is the recipient of the advance wedding distribution memo. I was having trouble breathing. Rachel hasn't even gotten engaged. I stared at the screen and muttered, I know. 5 days prior to the family meeting, on July 18, they insisted that I reschedule my wedding 5 days prior. Before they even asked, they had already taken the money. David opened a second document. The 2019 trust documents, from my grandparents' will. He was reading out loud, wedding fund of $150,000 to be distributed to first grandchild upon marriage to be used for wedding expenses, first home down payment, or marital establishment as beneficiary sees fit. I looked at him. That's not Rachel, that's you, Emily. They are the trustees, though. They have control over it, I said. It is expected that they will act in your best interest. He gestured to the screen. This is a fiduciary duty violation. They gave $90,000 to someone who isn't even the beneficiary. It's against the law. Something changed inside of me. Clarity, something cooler, not grief or rage. How do we proceed? I inquired. David's laptop opened another folder. After constructing a case, we demonstrate their actions to everyone at the reception. I stared at him. You want to expose them at our wedding? They abandoned you. They made an attempt to call off your wedding. They stole your inheritance. David, his voice cracked. They humiliated you in front of 250 people. They deserve to know the truth. I thought about my grandparents. I thought about the trust fund they'd left. Not for my parents to control, but for me to build a life. Okay, I said, let's do it. Over the next week, David compiled everything. Bank statements showing the $90,000 transfer to Rachel, the trust documents with the beneficiary clause highlighted. My mother's venue sabotage emails, text messages from my parents. We'll give you nothing. This is to teach you humility. Screenshots of Rachel's Instagram posts, including one from July 20th, just 2 days after she received the money, showing her booking first-class tickets to Bali. Caption, treating myself because I deserve it. David created a PowerPoint presentation, 22 slides. Title slide, The Price of Humility. What? The Hayes family doesn't want you to know. This will destroy them, I said. David looked at me. They destroyed your wedding first. On November 16th, the night before the wedding, David asked, last chance to back out. We can just get married and move on. I thought about my grandmother. I thought about the trust fund she'd left with my name on it. I thought about the words my father had used, humility, consequences, family. We show them everything, I said. Then David found one more thing. At 11 p.m., he called me into the living room. His laptop was open. Another bank transfer on the screen. Look at this, he said. September 10th, 2025. 3 days after my mother called to say they'd attend the wedding, but not be happy. Transfer amount $15,500. Memo, Bali extension package plus excursions. Source account, my father's personal Chase account. I laughed. It came out broken. Almost hysterical. They paid for her trip. I said after punishing me. After saying they had no money, they paid $15,000 for Rachel's vacation. David put his arm around me. Tomorrow, everyone knows. November 17th, 2026. I woke up at 6:15 a.m. in the bridal suite at Barton Creek Resort. My heart was pounding before I even opened my eyes. Hair appointment at 8, ceremony at 4, reception at 7, and somewhere in between my parents would arrive or they wouldn't. I checked my phone. No messages. At Bang Salon on Congress Avenue, my bridesmaids tried to keep the mood light. Jess, my maid of honor, brought mimosas. David's sister told terrible jokes, but I couldn't focus. At 9:47 a.m., Rachel posted an Instagram story, a video of herself on a beach in Positano, Italy. Apparently, she'd extended her Bali trip into a full European tour. The caption, sometimes you have to choose your number, living my truth, number, no regrets. Jess saw my face. Don't look at her page, too late. But honestly, it made what we were about to do easier. At 2 p.m., I was back in the bridal suite staring at my dress. Ivory A-line, lace sleeves, $3,500. I'd paid for it myself. My mother was supposed to help me into it. Instead, Jess zipped me up. I put on my grandmother's pearl necklace, the one from her estate. It felt heavy against my collarbone. I looked at myself in the mirror. Grandma would be proud, I whispered. Jess hugged me. Your mom is missing this. That's on her. At 2:33 p.m., my phone buzzed. Text from my mother. We'll be there, but don't expect smiles. I turned my phone off. At 3:45 p.m., there was a knock on the door. Uncle Ryan, my father's younger brother, 58 years old, owns an HVAC company, the kind of guy who shows up when you need him. 2 days earlier, I'd called him and asked if he'd walk me down the aisle. My father had refused. Uncle Ryan said yes immediately. Your father is making a mistake, Emily. I'd be honored. Now he stood in the doorway in his suit, eyes a little red. Ready, kiddo? He asked. I took his arm. Through the window, I could see guests arriving, including my parents. Back row, far left, away from everyone. 2 empty seats in the front row where they should have been. At 4 p.m., the ceremony began. The overlook pavilion was perfect. String lights, hill country views. 250 white chairs arranged in rows. 178 people actually showed up. Some distant relatives had already heard about the drama and stayed home. Patchell's canon played. My bridesmaids walked down the aisle. The flower girl, David's 6-year-old niece, scattered petals. Then it was my turn. Uncle Ryan and I walked. I didn't look at the back row. I kept my eyes on David. He stood at the altar in his gray suit. And when our eyes met, he mouthed, "You've got this." Pastor Mike, our officiant, smiled. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today," the ceremony proceeded. A reading from Corinthians, a prayer. Then Pastor Mike said the words every officiant says. "If anyone has objections to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace." Silence, then movement. Back row. My father stood up. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Pastor Mike blinked. "Sir, this isn't." My father's voice cut through the air loud enough for everyone to hear. "Emily, your mother and I are leaving. Think about what you've done to this family. We won't be part of this mistake." My mother stood beside him, sobbing, theatrical, loud. They walked down the center aisle. Mom's heels clicked against the stone. Dad's hand on her back guiding her. 50 people from the unsweet side of the family sat frozen. Mouths open. Some crying. No one breathed. The silence lasted 45 seconds. It felt like 45 years. Then Uncle Ryan, still holding my arm, leaned close and whispered, "Keep going, honey." I looked at Pastor Mike. My voice came out steady, "Continue, please." Pastor Mike nodded, cleared his throat, and continued, "Love is patient, love is kind." We exchanged vows. David held my hands. His voice was steady, but when he got to the end, he improvised. "Emily, your strength humbles me. Today, in front of everyone here, I promise I will always stand up for you. Always, no matter who's watching." I felt tears sting my eyes. We exchanged rings. Pastor Mike smiled, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." We kissed. The crowd applauded, some of them crying, some still in shock. As we walked back down the aisle, I saw Aunt Natalie, my father's older sister. She was sobbing. She mouthed, "I'm so sorry." I smiled at her because in 4 hours, sorry wouldn't be necessary. Justice would be cocktail hour, 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. The terrace overlooked the hill country. Sunset was starting to bleed across the sky. People sipped wine, ate appetizers, and whispered, "What happened? Are they coming back? I can't believe they just left." I said the same thing to everyone who asked. They made their choice. David circulated through the crowd, calm and composed. But I saw him check his watch. 7 p.m. Dinner. 8:15 p.m. Toasts. That's when. At 5:45, the photographer asked for family photos. "Just David's side," I said. She looked confused. "What about just his side?" David adjusted his tie. "Game. Face on." At 6:30 p.m., we entered the grand ballroom. The transformation was stunning. String lights crisscrossed the ceiling. Eucalyptus garlands draped the tables. 20 round tables, each seating 10. The DJ announced us. "Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time ever, Mr. and Mrs. David Peterson." Cheers. Applause. We danced to Thinking Out Loud by Ed Sheeran. For 3 minutes and 40 seconds, it felt almost normal, except for table 3, front left, parents' table, 2 empty chairs, name cards still in place, Brandon Hayes, Lauren Hayes. Everyone saw it. Dinner was served at 7 p.m., filet mignon or Chilean sea bass. Salad, main course, dessert, tiramisu. I couldn't eat. David couldn't either. We were waiting at 8:10 p.m. David excused himself. "Restroom," he said. He went to the DJ booth, set up his laptop, connected it to the projection screen, the one we'd rented for a photo slideshow. He loaded the PowerPoint, came back to our table, squeezed my hand. "Last chance, do it." At 8:15 p.m., the toasts began. Ryan, the best man, told funny stories about David. 6 minutes of laughter. Jess, my maid of honor, told sweet stories about our friendship. 5 minutes of tears. Then the DJ said, "And now a special message from the groom." David stood, took the microphone. The room quieted. He looked at me. I nodded. He turned to face the room. 165 people. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he said. "Especially those who stayed after the interruption earlier." A few nervous laughs. "I'm not usually one for public speaking," David continued. "But today, something happened that I can't ignore, and neither should you." He clicked a button. The projection screen lit up behind him. Title slide, white text on black, "The Price of Humility." People leaned forward. David's voice was steady, calm, deadly. Emily's father told her she needed to learn humility. Her mother said this wedding would teach her consequences. "Well, let me show you what humility actually costs and who's been paying it." Click. Slide 2. A photo. Black and white. 1956. My grandparents on their wedding day. "This is where the story starts," David said. Slides 3 through 6 showed the trust documents, excerpts from my grandparents' will. The language was highlighted in yellow, wedding fund of $150,000 to be distributed to the first grandchild upon marriage. David read it aloud slowly. In 2019, Emily's grandparents passed away. They left a trust fund, $150,000 specifically for their first grandchild's wedding. "That's Emily." He paused. "Not her sister, Rachel." Emily. The room was silent. Here's what her parents did with it. Click. Slide 7. A bank statement. July 18, 2025. Rachel R. Hayes. Recipient. Memo. Advance wedding distribution. Gasps. People whispered. Heads turned. David paused for 5 seconds, then went on. Rachel, who isn't even engaged, received $90,000 2 months before Emily's wedding, despite her parents telling Emily she wouldn't receive anything. Click. Slides 8 through 11. Instagram screenshots. Rachel's posts. Bali. First-class flights. Luxury resorts. The caption from July 20, treating myself, because I deserve it. Then another post, October 12, Bali again. The dates overlapping with my wedding. Then today's post, Positano, Italy. Sometimes you have to choose you. David's voice was colder now. Brandon and Lauren Hayes told Emily she was selfish for not moving her wedding, a wedding she'd booked 20 months in advance for Rachel's vacation. A vacation they then paid $18,000 to extend. Click slide 12. Another bank transfer September 10, 2025. Amount $18,000. Memo, C. Hayes Bali extension package. After punishing Emily, David said, after claiming they had no money, they spent $18,000 on Rachel's Instagram content. Aunt Natalie stood up. Her hand covered her mouth. She whispered something I couldn't hear. 3 people at her table started crying. David moved to slides 13 through 15. My mother's emails to the venue coordinator. He read them aloud, every word. This wedding should not proceed on this date. I'm asking you to help us stop this mistake. Sent October 2nd, 16 days before the wedding by my own mother. People gasped. Someone said, "Oh my God." Uncle Ryan stood up, looked at the empty chair where his brother should have been, said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Brandon, you son of a bitch." Then sat back down. David continued. Slides 16 through 18. This morning's text from my mother. Screenshot on the screen. We'll be there, but don't expect smiles. Then a video clip 10 seconds from the ceremony. My father standing. His voice, "Emily, we're leaving. Think about what you've done to this family." Audio crystal clear. A freeze frame. My mother's face sobbing theatrically. David let it play twice, and then today in front of 250 people, Brandon Hayes stood up during his daughter's wedding ceremony and said this. He pointed to the screen before walking out because Emily wouldn't change her date for a vacation that he paid for with her inheritance money. The silence was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Slides 19 through 21. The financial breakdown. Wedding costs $60,000 total. Itemized. Venue $18,500. Catering $16,000. Photography, $5,800. Emily is a nonprofit program coordinator, and I am a financial analyst. The remaining balance was paid by Emily's savings of $25,000, David's savings plus his grandmother's inheritance of $35,000, and the parents' contribution of $0. David's voice was now barely audible, barely a whisper, but it was captured on the microphone. Emily's parents, who own 3 car dealerships and have a net worth of $5 million, did not contribute anything. He paused. Correction, they contributed $90,000 that they took from her. Click slide 22, final slide. White text on black. Emily didn't learn humility today. We saved for 5 years. I used money my grandmother left me when she passed away last year. She discovered the true identity of her family. David set down the microphone, approached me, and extended his hand. I stood up, and he gave the room one final speech. I have 3 folders here if anyone wants copies of these documents for legal purposes or otherwise. Come see me after. He placed 3 manila folders on the table. He then took a seat next to me. The room was quiet for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and then Aunt Natalie stood up and began to clap, slowly at first, then more quickly. Uncle Ryan then stood up and clapped, followed by David's parents, table by table, 165 people standing and clapping not for us, but for the truth. The 9-0, second ovation ended with chaos. You did the right thing, son. Uncle Ryan hugged David. Aunt Natalie came to me with mascara running. I didn't know, she said sobbingly. I swear to God, Emily, I didn't know. 15 people grabbed their coats and left, including distant Hayes cousins, some of my father's golf buddies, and people who couldn't handle what they'd just witnessed. David's phone, 2-8. He turned it off. My phone, silenced on the table, lit up like a Christmas tree. 37 text notifications. My cousin Jennifer, my father's niece, stormed outside with her phone pressed to her ear. I watched her pacing and making wildly erratic gestures through the window, screaming at someone, most likely my father. He said, "Not tonight, tonight we dance." The DJ paused awkwardly, then said, "Oh, all right." The dance floor exploded, people needed a release, the energy was wild, the laughter was louder, the dancing was harder, and it turned into the best party I've ever attended. Let's continue this celebration. He played Uptown Funk. To David for having balls, and to Emily for having a spine, and to all of us for witnessing the most legendary wedding toast in history. Ryan grabbed the microphone for an impromptu second toast at 9:45 p.m. The room erupted, and as the last guests left at 11:42 p.m., Aunt Natalie gave me another hug. We returned to the bridal suite at midnight, and David turned his phone back on. He found 4 voicemails, one from Uncle Ryan, saying, "David, call me tomorrow. I need copies of those documents." 3 from unidentified numbers, and a woman's voice playing on speaker. "Your grandmother would be so proud," she said, "not of the money, of you." That's when I finally started crying, happy tears. This is Amanda Chen from KVUE News. We got a tip about an incident at a wedding tonight involving Brandon and Lauren Hayes of Hayes Auto Group. Could you confirm and comment? I looked at David and he pulled me close. Good, let it spread. Let everyone know what they did. My phone was buzzing nonstop when I woke up on Sunday morning, November 19, at 9 a.m. 3 of David's cousins had posted about the speech on Facebook, and by noon, one of the posts had 2,300 shares. The comments were harsh. "This is crazy. Sue them. Boycott Hayes dealerships." Someone had started the hashtag number justice for Emily. Austin area code, unknown number. "Hello, Emily," I replied. "This is David Brennan, an attorney. Trust litigation is my area of expertise. I witnessed last night's events. I want to speak on your behalf." Tuesday, November 21st, pro bono. David and I met David Brennan in his downtown office, which is on the 7th floor and has glass windows that look out over the city. After reviewing everything: trust documents, bank statements, emails, text messages, and 90 minutes, he looked up and said, "You have an airtight case." "For what?" I asked. "Breach of fiduciary duty. Your parents, as trustees, violated their legal obligation to act in your best interest." He was 55, silver-haired, and wore a sharp suit. He had been practicing estate law for 25 years. He did some quick math on a legal pad and I'd estimate a settlement of $210,000, $150,000 original trust, $55,000 in punitive damages, and $18,000 in legal fees. That $90,000 distribution to Rachel was illegal. You're entitled to full restoration of trust funds plus punitive damages. I felt lightheaded. How long if they settle? 2 weeks. On Thursday, November 23rd, the 5th day after the wedding, David filed the lawsuit in Travis County District Court, claiming complaint, breach of fiduciary duty, conversion, and unjust enrichment. He grinned grimly and said, "If they fight, 6 months. But they'll settle. The publicity alone will force them." The papers were served to my parents on Friday, November 24th, at 3:15 p.m. On Saturday, November 25th, I Googled Hayes Auto Group and found 47 new 1-star reviews. For example, the owner steals from his own daughter. Uncle Ryan texted me, "Your father just called me. He's furious. Says you're destroying the family name." I told him, "You destroyed it when you walked out on your daughter." He hung up. The reviews kept coming in, and by Monday, November 27th, the Austin American-Statesman had picked up the story. Headline: Local dealership owner sued by daughter over wedding fund. KVUE ran a 2-minute segment, interviewing Uncle Ryan on camera. Would you trust him with your money? Another family values? More like family lies. Never buy here. My brother made a terrible mistake, he said. Sales at the dealerships fell 35% that week, according to Uncle Ryan's insiders. David contacted on Tuesday, November 29th, saying they wanted to mediate. He allowed pride and favoritism to ruin his relationship with his daughter, and now he's facing social and legal repercussions, as he should. They're ready to settle, their lawyer told me this morning. I felt nothing, no victory, just fatigue. All right, I said, let's finish this. 2 weeks after the wedding, on December 5th, mediation took place in a neutral office building, with a retired judge serving as the mediator. My parents' attorney was combative and defensive. David was composed and methodical, and he had everything recorded. The mediator moved back and forth between our separate rooms for 4 hours, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., and at the end of the process, I received an offer of $210,000 in full. The mediator then entered my room and made one request: no more press conferences or social media posts. I stood up after David looked at me and said, "You take the money, they take the lesson, and everyone moves on." I added one more clause, signed an apology acknowledging their actions, waited for 30 minutes, and the mediator came back. They agreed, said that an apology would be written tomorrow, and said that the money would be transferred within 5 business days. David took my hand and we left. Done. Friday, December 8th, the apology came by certified mail. It was a 1-page document that was typed and signed by both Brandon and Lauren Hayes. We admitted that we let pride and partiality dictate how we handled Emily's wedding and the trust fund that our parents had set up. I read it once and felt nothing. David said, "Is it enough? We failed Emily as parents. We are terribly sorry. We breached the confidence they placed in us as fiduciaries. This is simply paper. I put it in a drawer. I never heard back. On Tuesday, December 12th, the money arrived in our account. Wire transfer, memo, settlement, Hayes versus Hayes. Balance $210,000. After spending a considerable amount of time staring at the screen, I began looking at houses. 6 months later, in May 2027, David and I purchased our first house, a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in Buda, Texas, for $400,000. The down payment was $60,000 from the settlement. Like everyone else, we obtained a mortgage for the remaining amount. At 12 weeks pregnant, we hadn't spoken to my parents since the mediation. No texts, no calls, and Rachel's Instagram following had fallen to 91,000 after losing 65,000. When the story went viral, she lost several brands, and she now posted less frequently, with captions that were different and less confident. It was Easter Sunday, May 5. Uncle Ryan was present, along with David's parents and a couple of cousins. When Aunt Natalie invited us to dinner, she said softly over dessert, "Your father asks about you through your uncle. He wants to meet the baby when it comes." I put down my fork, maybe if he earns it. Uncle Ryan nodded, "That's fair." That night, David and I sat in the nursery, painting. He was looking at trust documents, both new and ones we were making for our child. "What should we include in our will?" he said, referring to the soft yellow walls and the crib we had put together. I considered my grandparents, the trust fund they had left, and how it had been used against me. For this kid? I asked myself. I grinned. Instead of us, how about using this to create a life that brings you happiness? David gave me a kiss. Excellent. Keep a record of everything if you're listening to this and your family is controlling you with money, silencing you with humility, or manipulating you with guilt. Be aware of your legal rights. If you need a lawyer, get one. Additionally, keep in mind that sometimes your family is stronger than the one you were born into. You're not by yourself. We're still painting the nursery in that house. Last week, my parents sent a gift. I gave it back. Perhaps there will be reconciliation in the future, perhaps not. However, with 2 empty seats in the first row and 165 spectators, I discovered something that day at the Overlook Pavilion. Families can be created or born. Ours. At my parents' dinner, my sister cruelly told my son he didn't deserve to be at the birthday party. That was when I realized I was done being the fixer. Your son doesn't deserve to be at my son's birthday. My sister spoke slowly, as if she wanted to enjoy the cruelty, as she leaned across the table and glared at my child. The only thing I did was tell her, no, I wasn't going to buy her that fancy car she had been eyeing on the internet, as if it were already hers. The room went dark for an instant. Even my parents couldn't help but burst out laughing when Ethan was harmed, as if it were some sort of entertainment. Silently, I glanced at my son and then at them, and I whispered, everyone will get what they deserve. No one had any idea what that would imply. I suppose I should identify myself before everything else makes sense. My name is Jessica, and I'm a 29-year-old music producer based in Los Angeles. I prefer working alone with my headphones, rather than collaborating with others. On most days, I have a partially completed melody to listen to, and my son Ethan draws dinosaurs on the desk next to me as I work to meet deadlines. I tend to be calm, and I guess I should be, because I come from a family where storms can strike at any moment. Before I even had a word for it, I was the kid who solved grown-ups' problems. I was 12 years old when our apartment heater went out and scorched dust filled the air. My mom fought with bills on the kitchen floor, and Sarah, who was 4 years younger and already quite dramatic, cried until the neighbors came to check on us. In my childhood home, being loud got you noticed, while being quiet got you in trouble. I learned to keep it together, and when I began making money through songwriting, nobody thought to ask Sarah for help with a broken air conditioner at my parents' house, or the groceries my mom promised to pay me back for my dad's insurance premium. He completely disregarded Sarah's gas, makeup, pop-up event, new project, and next idea. At first, I didn't mind. Helping felt like love. However, as I continued to lend them a hand, they began to treat me as though I owed them something, as if the stability in my life were a communal resource they could take advantage of whenever they pleased. Sarah was the most notorious user of this tactic. She would constantly reinvent herself, 1 month running a candle business, the next a lash artist, and finally a coach sending me images of her vision boards and the tools she needed to launch her brand, all the while subtly reminding me that I was her older sister, the one who was responsible and made enough money. She sent me 3 links with price tags that made my throat tighten, and I let it slide for a while. Then she pushed, and group chat messages piled on, and family pressure masquerading as encouragement. My mother wrote, "Your sister needs stability." My dad chimed in, saying, "Real family shows up." Sarah concluded by saying, "You're doing amazing in LA. Just be yourself." The answer is simple, yes. Not me. Not this time. That's why we had that meal. It's why Sarah arrived late dressed like a stage performer. And it's why everyone at the table was waiting to see if I would act like my typical self and make things simple. Instead of questioning their laughter, I felt a subtle shift within me. And I realized, for the first time, this truth: when you stop acting the role they gave you, the entire cast turns against you. That night at dinner, it was like walking into a play I hadn't tried out for. Ethan sat next to me, swinging his legs and tapping a quiet rhythm on his plate. My parents chatted with Sarah as if nothing mattered. The dining room in my parents' house had remained unchanged for years. I could still hear the hum of the old ceiling fan and smell the faint aroma of overcooked chicken. The table wobbled like it had when I was a kid. My car died, and I already told my followers, I'm getting a new G-Class, the matte one. Sarah glanced at me and said, you saw the links. I didn't respond right away. I cut Ethan's chicken, handed him a napkin, and took a slow breath. Sarah then changed the atmosphere of the room with a single sentence. My silence irritated Sarah, so she leaned back and said, just make sure you're paying for the down payment. Nothing major has happened. My mom said something about providing for the family, and my dad added his customary, you're the stable one, Jessica. I set down my fork and spat out the word no. It sounded like a dropped plate. As if anticipating the joke, everyone blinked. Sarah scoffed. Come on. I repeated my denial. My father genuinely chuckled, saying, she's joking. My mother smiled hard and said, of course, she'll help. She always does. I said without smiling or otherwise softening my expression. I'm not buying a car for you. Sarah's expression hardened into something severe after a brief pause. As Ethan sat quietly coloring a dinosaur on the back of his paper placemat, she turned to him and said, then your son doesn't deserve to attend my son's birthday. Her words were cold and rehearsed, as if she had been planning them for some time. Ethan's marker froze midline, and his shoulders drew in. He looked up at me with confusion, as if he couldn't comprehend that an adult had intentionally hurt him. I felt a tightening in my gut, not fury just yet, but a cold, clinical understanding. My family was fine with Sarah taking advantage of me and my child. Someone muttered savage as if it were a punchline. My mom hid a smile under her hand, and my dad shook his head silently. No one bothered to tell her it was wrong. Nobody even seemed uneasy. As I glanced around the table, I could see the little wounds that had been slowly opening up over the years, like the late-night transfers, gas bills, and apologies I had to make for Sarah's behavior. I could feel myself inhaling steadily every time I assured Ethan, they love you, baby, despite the fact that their actions betrayed my words. Everyone will get what they deserve, I whispered under their breath. They continued to laugh, failing to perceive the boundary that was creating itself as they ate dessert. After dinner, as Sarah revealed the birthday party's color theme, I assisted Ethan with his shoes. He leaned into me, small and warm. Am I to blame? What went wrong? I replied him, no. You did everything right. Parents are meant to be shields, and in that moment, I understood I had been protecting the wrong people for years after he muttered that. Sarah had never said anything that broke me more than that. At home, as Ethan dozed off with his dinosaur still held in his fist, I sat at my desk, my eyes fixed on the light from my laptop. The house was silent, but my thoughts were racing. This wasn't an outburst, it wasn't a miscommunication. It was a pattern, and patterns don't collapse without a rip. The house was heavier than usual when we returned that night, as if the air itself was waiting for me to make a decision, something I had avoided doing throughout my adult life. Ethan, as usual after anything confusing or painful, headed straight for the couch, his dinosaur curled into the corner. I warmed up some leftover pasta and sat next to him, watching his little shoulders sway. He didn't mention Sarah's words. Children simply know how to bear their pain. I stepped to my desk as the light from my laptop illuminated the cramped room, casting long shadows over Ethan's crayons and toy cars scattered on the floor. I stood in the doorway for a moment, listening to the gentle rhythm of his breathing. That sound had accompanied me through deadlines, breakups, tired mornings, and chaotic family calls. It grounded me. I started by opening a blank note and typing the word boundaries at the top. This was not about anger or revenge, but about the one thing my family had always told me not to have. I went on to list all the ways my family secretly depended on me, including my mother's phone line on my plan, my father's insurance that I had been paying for months, Sarah's storage unit linked to my card, and various subscriptions, streaming services, music apps, and payments that I had assumed due to guilt, exhaustion, or habit. Something changed in my chest when I saw it written down. It wasn't cruel to stop, it was simple clarity. I composed 3 emails, no feelings, no essays about the past, no explanations they would later twist, just facts. I informed my mother that her phone line would be transferred tomorrow and included the necessary steps. I informed my father that his insurance payment would be transferred to his own card on the 1st of the month. I revised each message, removing any angry overtones. Anger was fuel, but clarity was strategy. Just before sending them, I whispered the same sentence I had said at dinner, but this time it wasn't a warning, it was a promise to myself. I included a detailed list of the money Sarah owed me, the dates it was due, and a reasonable payment plan. I concluded with one sentence, I am not a lender. I hit send, and the house remained silent. No alarms went off, no explosions occurred, and there was no drama, just a new kind of quiet, like the one you experience just before your life begins to divide in two. Tomorrow was Oliver's birthday party, and everyone expected me to be there, smile, and fold like I always had. However, tomorrow I would not be dressing as the family fixer, but rather as Ethan's mother. As I awoke, the sky over Los Angeles appeared washed out, a pale blue that feels too bright in comparison to the weight of your chest. Ethan, full of that innocent excitement that only children can feel, woke up early and held aloft the birthday card he had made for Oliver, a blue scribbled car with crooked wheels and a small stick figure waving from the window. How does he feel about it? As we drove to my parents' neighborhood, Ethan kicked his heels softly against the back of my seat, humming a tune he'd heard me mix the night before. We passed rows of identical houses with trimmed lawns and plastic seasonal decorations. I lied and told him he would love it, ruffling his hair. I didn't tell him the truth, though. Today wasn't going to go according to anyone's expectations. As we pulled into the driveway, he got out, his grip on the card firm in both hands. The party was well underway. I could hear the sound of music on the sidewalk, the laughter of children, the barking of a dog, the cry for more cotton candy, and the sight of a colorful arch of blue and silver balloons encircling the driveway. On a folding table were cupcakes adorned with printable cartoon faces. Mark lingered beside her, holding a cluster of balloons, looking as checked out as ever. Sarah crossed her arms. The rented bounce slide towered over everything, shimmering under the sun. The kind of birthday party that looked perfect on social media. As we approached the yard, Sarah spotted us. She stood near the arch, wearing a white jumpsuit and oversized sunglasses, even though the party was mostly in the shade. She glanced at the birthday card in Ethan's hands, then returned her gaze to me, her lips forming a smug smile. "Did you bring the keys to my car?" she said, her tone belying her words. "We won't stay long." "No." Her smile faded as she continued to be devoted to the bit. I remained fixed on her. "Are you seriously doing this in this place, Jessica?" My mother muttered angrily, "Don't make a commotion." Just as I was about to respond, my mother suddenly materialized from behind her, like if beckoned. "The kids are here." My jaw clenched as I continued, "I'm not trying to start a commotion, but yesterday she said my son doesn't belong here." A couple other parents in the area looked away. My dad came over from the grill, spatula in hand, as if he were getting ready to give a lecture. "Let's be reasonable." I hadn't anticipated an audience, but maybe it was absolutely required. My sister was distressed. Sarah sneered and said, "Oh, please. Just because she's upset doesn't mean she can attack a child." I agreed with Sarah. "Laugh it off." Ethan clenched his fists around my hand and leaned toward me, telling me not to be theatrical. I lowered myself to Ethan's level and asked, "Hey, buddy, would you mind sitting with Grandpa for a second?" The pressure was mounting. This was not the time to back down. He hesitated, but nodded and took a few small steps toward my dad, clutching the card like it was fragile glass. I stood and everything in me settled. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I'm done," I said. With a single, bewildered giggle, Sarah asked, "Done with what?" "Looking foolish." "With the money going toward everything," I exclaimed. "When I'm treated as though my opinion doesn't matter." As her spectacles fell down her nose, she said, "You're punishing us because you don't want to help your family." She continued, "With you talking about my son like he's leverage." My mom tried again, "I'm putting limits because you don't know how to respect family." I turned to her and said, "Jessica, no. Mom, this is vital. You have been told before. Last night, as she shamed Ethan, you all stood by and laughed. Don't call that family." A couple of grown-ups drew nearer, and the yard became silent, the type of silence that precedes a storm or a reckoning that is painful. I went to Sarah once more. "I've covered your bills, your debts, your emergencies, your hobbies, your rebrands, your impulsive purchases, your short-lived businesses. As of today, all of it ends." Her mouth partially parted, then closed. "I've covered things you don't even remember because you never asked how they got paid." When I asked my dad what ends meant, he scowled. "We have routed your phone lines. Your insurance has been re-enrolled on your..." At my parents' dinner, my sister cruelly told my son he didn't deserve to be at the birthday party. That was when I realized I was done being the fixer. "Your son doesn't deserve to be at my son's birthday." My sister spoke slowly, as if she wanted to enjoy the cruelty, as she leaned across the table and glared at my child. The only thing I did was tell her, no, I wasn't going to buy her that fancy car she had been eyeing on the internet, as if it were already hers. The room went dark for an instant. Even my parents couldn't help but burst out laughing when Ethan was harmed, as if it were some sort of entertainment. Silently, I glanced at my son and then at them, and I whispered, "Everyone will get what they deserve." No one had any idea what that would imply. I suppose I should identify myself before everything else makes sense. My name is Jessica, and I'm a 29-year-old music producer based in Los Angeles. I prefer working alone with my headphones, rather than collaborating with others. On most days, I have a partially completed melody to listen to, and my son Ethan draws dinosaurs on the desk next to me as I work to meet deadlines. I tend to be calm, and I guess I should be, because I come from a family where storms can strike at any moment. Before I even had a word for it, I was the kid who solved grown-ups' problems. I was 12 years old when our apartment heater went out and scorched dust filled the air. My mom fought with bills on the kitchen floor, and Sarah, who was 4 years younger and already quite dramatic, cried until the neighbors came to check on us. In my childhood home, being loud got you noticed, while being quiet got you in trouble. I learned to keep it together, and when I began making money through songwriting, nobody thought to ask Sarah for help with a broken air conditioner at my parents' house, or the groceries my mom promised to pay me back for my dad's insurance premium. He completely disregarded Sarah's gas, makeup, pop-up event, new project, and next idea. At first, I didn't mind, helping felt like love. However, as I continued to lend them a hand, they began to treat me as though I owed them something, as if the stability in my life were a communal resource they could take advantage of whenever they pleased. Sarah was the most notorious user of this tactic. She would constantly reinvent herself, 1 month running a candle business, the next a lash artist, and finally a coach sending me images of her vision boards and the tools she needed to launch her brand, all the while subtly reminding me that I was her older sister, the one who was responsible and made enough money. She sent me 3 links with price tags that made my throat tighten, and I let it slide for a while. Then she pushed, and group chat messages piled on, and family pressure masquerading as encouragement. My mother wrote, "Your sister needs stability." My dad chimed in, saying, "Real family shows up." Sarah concluded by saying, "You're doing amazing in LA. Just be yourself." The answer is simple, yes. Not me. Not this time. That's why we had that meal. It's why Sarah arrived late dressed like a stage performer. And it's why everyone at the table was waiting to see if I would act like my typical self and make things simple. Instead of questioning their laughter, I felt a subtle shift within me. And I realized, for the first time, this truth: when you stop acting the role they gave you, the entire cast turns against you. That night at dinner, it was like walking into a play I hadn't tried out for. Ethan sat next to me, swinging his legs and tapping a quiet rhythm on his plate. My parents chatted with Sarah as if nothing mattered. The dining room in my parents' house had remained unchanged for years. I could still hear the hum of the old ceiling fan and smell the faint aroma of overcooked chicken. The table wobbled like it had when I was a kid. My car died, and I already told my followers, "I'm getting a new G-Class, the matte one." Sarah glanced at me and said, "You saw the links." I didn't respond right away. I cut Ethan's chicken, handed him a napkin, and took a slow breath. Sarah then changed the atmosphere of the room with a single sentence. My silence irritated Sarah, so she leaned back and said, "Just make sure you're paying for the down payment. Nothing major has happened." My mom said something about providing for the family, and my dad added his customary, "You're the stable one, Jessica." I set down my fork and spat out the word no. It sounded like a dropped plate. As if anticipating the joke, everyone blinked. Sarah scoffed. "Come on." I repeated my denial. My father genuinely chuckled, saying, "She's joking." My mother, "I told police about the fake cop. Until security footage showed the kidnapper was my husband, I'd been married to the monster all along." I was ready to answer no when the child looked at me with terror in her eyes. She nodded slightly and mouthed the words, "Say yes, please." Although the guard was not looking, something in her expression made me believe her right away. "Yes. This is my daughter." I drew her into a hug, feeling her tremble against me. The security guard was skeptical. He was a stocky man with a mustache who reminded me of Martin Culler. "She was hiding in the dressing rooms for over an hour." Staff was concerned. "I'm so sorry. We got separated, and she must have gotten scared," I replied. I massaged the girl's back, attempting to appear maternal. "You know how kids are." He took a close look at both of us. The girl burrowed her face into my shoulder, and I could feel her heart beating against my chest. Finally, he nodded and moved away. But I noticed he was talking into his radio as he went. We did not have much time. As soon as he turned the corner, I knelt at the girl's level. She wore dirty blonde hair in an untidy ponytail, and her Pokémon Eve t-shirt was stained. Dark bags beneath her eyes made her appear older than she actually was. Her eyes darted around as if she expected someone to jump out at any moment. "Are you safe?" I inquired calmly. She shakes her head. "There's someone who took my mom, and I'm scared they'll take me too." My heart raced, but I tried to remain calm for her. I grasped her hand and noted how chilly her fingertips were. "Let's go somewhere with more people, okay?" I took her to the food court, where it was packed and we'd fit in better. The lunch rush meant that every table was occupied, and the commotion would drown out our discourse. I got her a slice of pizza and a lemonade before finding us seats near the exit. She devoured the food as if she had not eaten in days. "Who took your mom? What did they look like?" I asked, keeping my voice calm as I searched every face that passed. She wiped her mouth with the back of her palm. "The man said he was a cop, but he wasn't a cop." My mom knew something was wrong. "How did she know?" I inquired, watching a man in a maintenance uniform wheel a waste cart by us. The girl sipped the lemonade I had bought her. Her hands shook slightly while holding the cup. "She used to be a cop. She said his badge looked fake, and his uniform was wrong. The shoulder patches were for a different county, and his belt only had handcuffs." "What happened then?" I observed the same security man as before, standing by the Tango smoothie bar, watching us. "We were shopping for my birthday when he approached us," she recalled. "My mom grabbed my hand really tight and started walking fast, but he followed. She made me go into the changing room at Motorhouse Lens and told me, 'That man is not a cop. Do not let them grab you by any means.' Then I heard yelling, and when I came out she was gone." "When did this happen?" I was already getting out my phone to dial 911. "4 days ago," she replied, glancing down at her pizza crust. 4 days? Where have you been staying?" I attempted to put my disbelief at bay. "My mom's car. She taught me where she hid the spare key under the wheel well, but I ran out of the snacks she kept in there yesterday." The girl's eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them away as if she was used to being tough. I was dialing 911 when she abruptly grabbed my arm. Her little fingers dug in with unexpected strength. "He's here. The fake cop is here." My thumb froze on the call button. I looked around and saw just regular mall shoppers, families with strollers eating orange chicken, adolescents taking photos by the fountain, and a man in a suit checking his phone near the ATM. I don't see anyone in a police uniform. He changed clothes, but I know his face. He limps a little on his left side, and his shoes. My mom taught me to memorize details. Black dress shoes with a scuff on the right toe. She was almost hyperventilating now. "Okay, we're going to calmly walk to the bathroom. Then we'll figure out what to do." I dropped the 911 call for the time being and grasped her hand. We stood up, attempting to appear nonchalant. The girl remained close to my side, using me as a shield against whoever she had seen. The food court seemed larger now, and every face was suspicious. We strolled past the Chinese restaurant, and I was incredibly bewildered. She grabbed my hand and shook it just as we got to the bathroom hallway. "That's him, the man in the blue jacket by Subway," she said quietly without looking. When I glanced over, my blood ran cold. I viewed the man's profile and immediately recognized him. No, it can't be." "Are you absolutely sure?" My voice was hoarse. The girl looked about me before hastily hiding again. "That's him. He's the one who took my mom. He had a partner too. A woman. But I didn't see her face." In my mind, I wondered. A woman. But that man was my husband, Daniel Moreau. My entire body turned cold, and I tightened my grip on the girl's hand, pushing her into the bathroom. The heavy door swung shut behind us, and I forced her into the largest stall at the end, my hand shaking so severely that I could hardly turn the lock. As I attempted to understand what I had just seen, the girl flattened herself against the wall and watched me with those wide, fearful eyes. My husband was in the food court, and this youngster claimed he kidnapped her mother 4 days ago. I took out my phone and typed a text, attempting to keep my finger steady. "Hey babe. Where are you?" The 3 dots emerged almost immediately. "At work, dealing with inventory." "Why?" My stomach turned since I had just spotted him standing near the subway wearing his blue jacket, which he only wore on weekends. The girl yanked on my shirt and murmured that we needed to go immediately since he might have spotted us. I opened the stall door and glanced into the empty bathroom before carefully opening the main door to gaze down the corridor. Martin Collar, the previous security guard, was walking toward the food court with his radio held up to his mouth, so I hastily pulled back. We couldn't go back that way, and the girl began to shake again. When I saw a side exit door near the family restroom that led to a service hallway, I grabbed her hand. We snuck out quickly and found ourselves in a white hallway smelling of cleaning materials, with arrows going to the parking garage. My sneakers creaked on the waxed floor as we hurried past storage rooms and personnel break places. The girl stayed directly beside me, peering over her shoulder every few steps. We pushed through another hefty door and found ourselves in the parking garage, where the stench of pollution and oil assaulted us. I couldn't remember where I had parked, so I started clicking my key fob as we moved between the rows of cars. Finally, I heard my Volkswagen Golf beep from 2 rows away, and we dashed towards it. The girl slid into the passenger seat and quickly dived down below the window while I started the engine with trembling hands. I sat there for a second, trying to determine if I should contact 911 straight away or drive somewhere safe first. The girl must have sensed my uncertainty because she glanced up at me and said her mother always warned her not to trust anyone in uniform until she was certain they were genuine officers. She stated it gently, but firmly, as if she were repeating something she had been taught numerous times. That seemed sense, given what happened to her mother. And I knew my husband might have contacts in the police department. He'd mentioned cop pals previously, but I'd never met them, so it seemed odd. I decided we needed more information before involving any officials. So I put the car into reverse and began backing out. The child sat up slightly and indicated that her mother's car was still someplace in the mall parking lot, with essential items hidden inside. She knew the part because she had been residing there for 4 days and had remembered all of the neighboring locations. I carefully drove out of the garage and into the broad sunlight of the surface lot. We circled around to the opposite side of the mall, near the old Maison Armand entrance, which had been shuttered for years. The girl pointed to a faded gray Peugeot 308 with a shattered windshield, parked beneath a broken light pole. She told me to park a few places away so we wouldn't be noticed, and then she showed me exactly where her mother kept the extra key. It was magnetic and lodged inside the rear wheel, heavily coated in road dust and corrosion. The girl knew exactly where to reach and took it out with ease. The car smelt stale, and there were empty granola bar wrappers and juice boxes littered across the back seat. The girl walked directly to the glove compartment and took out a manila folder that was tucked behind the owner's manual. Inside was her mother's old police badge from 6 years ago, when she worked for the county sheriff's department. There were also photocopies, case files on missing individuals and fraud investigations, as well as a gas station receipt with a partial license plate number scrawled in ink. The girl said that her mother had been looking into something on her own time before this occurred. She'd overheard phone calls about people pretending to be cops and arresting people who owed money or had warrants. The receipt was from the day before they were apprehended, and her mother must have noticed something suspicious. I snapped pictures of everything with my phone and returned the folder to where we found it. We locked the car and returned the key to its hiding position in case we needed it again. Back in my car, I finally understood that we required real police assistance, despite the dangers of my husband's connections. I contacted 911, and when the operator answered, I tried to remain cool while saying that I had a child whose mother had been abducted 4 days prior. The operator inquired as to our current location and safety. She told us to go immediately to the main precinct downtown, and that she would tell the desk sergeant of our arrival. The drive took 25 minutes, and the girl remained silent the entire time, staring out the window. The police station was an ancient brick structure with tiny windows and a metal detector at the entrance. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and floor wax, and people sat on benches, looking tired and frustrated. I explained why we were there to the desk officer, who made a call and referred us to a conference room down the hallway. A woman in a suit walked in and identified herself as someone who worked with kid victims. She escorted the girl to another room to speak quietly, while a detective arrived to take my statement. I told her everything about how I found her in the mall, and what she had told me about the bogus cop who abducted her mother. I recounted seeing a suspicious individual, but did not say that it was my spouse since I wanted to consider how to handle the situation. The detective took notes and stated that they would review mall security footage to identify the offender, while the girl worked with the specialist to offer additional information. About 25 minutes later, a tall man in a gray suit entered with a big briefcase and introduced himself as Detective Luca Moretti. He had this calm demeanor that made me believe he'd seen a lot of awful things yet still cared about helping people. He sat down across from me and opened the folder containing forms and images. He instructed me to go over everything again from the beginning and take notes on a yellow legal pad while I spoke. When I reached to the point about seeing the man in the mall, his pen stopped moving and he looked up at me. He asked precise questions regarding the man's height and build, as well as the exact place where I saw him. I mentioned the blue jacket, the limp, and how the girl recognized him right away. He took out a tablet and showed me security camera stills from various angles throughout the mall. The photographs were fuzzy, but you could see people's features if you peered closely. He asked me to point out where we were sitting and which way the man was facing. While we were reading over the images, a woman in a blazer knocked and stepped in, claiming to be from Child Protection Services. She began discussing the girl's emergency foster placement and the paperwork that needed to be filed quickly. I felt my stomach drop when I thought of the girl being transferred to strangers after what she had gone through. I told the CPS officer that the girl should have a choice in what happens to her because she's been so smart and brave throughout this. The woman was upset and claimed protocol was protocol, but Detective Moretti supported me. He stated that the girl had demonstrated exceptional discernment and deserved to be heard about her views. The CPS woman left to speak with the girl and returned 15 minutes later, appearing less rigid. She explained that the girl had asked to call me later and wanted me to be a part of the process. Detective Moretti assisted in establishing approved contact between us and provided me with a unique phone number to utilize. The CPS representative confirmed that I could be designated as a support person during the placement process. She asked me to fill out background check documents and emergency contact information. Detective Moretti returned to displaying me photographs from mall security and asked if anyone appeared familiar or odd. He had dozens of photographs from various days and eras, all organized in a binder. I was browsing through them when the girl returned to the room with the specialist. She joined me in looking at the images. Then she pointed to one image, and my entire body became frigid. 4 days ago, I captured a profile image of my spouse strolling past the Tango smoothie bar booth. The timestamp read 3:12 p.m., which coincided with the girl's claim that her mother had been abducted. My hands began shaking, and I was unable to breathe properly. Detective Luca Moretti noted my reaction and inquired whether I recognized anyone. Before I could respond, my phone rang, and my husband's name showed on the screen. His timing was usually creepy, calling just as I was thinking about him. I said, attempting to seem natural while everyone in the room observed me. He asked where I was in that controlled tone he used when he was suspicious. I told him I was still at Galerie Laurent, looking for a birthday present for my sister. He claimed I'd been gone a long time and inquired about the Galerie Laurent. I mentioned the one downtown, and he asked what I had bought so far. I made up something about browsing for purses but not finding the right one yet. He continued asking for specifics. What color, what brand, and how much they cost. When I remained ambiguous, his voice became more aggressive, and he stated that he had driven by the mall earlier and had not seen my car. I explained that I had parked on the opposite side, by Maison Armand, because it was less congested. He paused for a few seconds before saying, I better not be lying to him. After I hung up, my hands shook so terribly that I dropped the phone. Detective Moretti snatched it up and gave me an understanding look. I took a big breath and informed him that the man in the photograph might be my spouse. He didn't act surprised or judge me, but instead began asking realistic questions. He asked to know my husband's entire name, birth date, and place of employment. He inquired about our vehicles and whether my husband had any law enforcement experience or training. I informed him that my husband used to work security at various places but never stayed at one for long. Detective Moretti called someone and asked for mall surveillance footage from today and 4 days ago. He wanted to see every view of the food court and nearby establishments. Within an hour, they had a laptop set up with multiple video feeds. We saw my spouse stroll around the mall 4 days ago with a small limp on his left side. His black dress shoes were seen in one image, with a scuff on the right toe. Today's CCTV showed guy in the blue jacket strolling through the food court just as we were there. Detective Moretti pointed out that my husband was constantly checking exits and studying individuals like he was hunting. An officer walked in and whispered something to the detective, who nodded and appeared serious. He informed me that they had placed an unmarked car outside the station 15 minutes ago for routine observation. The automobile had just radioed in that my husband's truck was moving slowly, as if seeking for something. When the driver observed the surveillance unit, he accelerated and departed the area. Detective Moretti stated that information indicated my spouse was looking for me and most likely knew I was coming here. He made some calls and, within an hour, had secured a safe location for me to remain. The department used an extended stay motel to protect witnesses. He had IT specialists come and mirror my phone, so that every call and text from my husband could be tracked and recorded. They provided me another phone to use for personal calls and instructed me to keep my main phone turned on and charged. They wanted my husband to believe everything was normal as they developed their case. That night, I was sitting in my hotel room when the new phone called. The girl called from her emergency foster placement. She seemed afraid, but said the family was lovely and provided her her own room with a lock on the door. She claimed she kept remembering more facts about where they took her mother. She noted a distinct odor, rubber mixed with chlorine. Similar to but not identical to a hospital. She assumed it was some sort of storage facility or warehouse because she heard metal doors slamming. I jotted down all she mentioned regarding the stench and the metal doors. And Detective Moretti immediately called to obtain a search warrant for my home. 3 hours later, while my husband was still at work, 7 officers arrived at my door carrying the paperwork. They walked through each room, taking items out of closets and looking under furniture. One officer discovered a prepaid phone taped behind our bedroom dresser, which I had never known existed. The call history revealed dozens of calls to storage facilities on the outskirts of town throughout the previous month. My regular phone vibrated with a text from my spouse asking where I was and requesting that I return home immediately soon. He claimed I was overreacting to things and making a huge deal out of nothing. His following message stated that he knew I had gone to the police station since a co-worker had seen my car there. He kept texting saying we needed to chat and that I was being crazy and worried as usual. The officers photographed everything, even the words. Detective Moretti arrived and inquired about our money as I sat on my couch, watching folks go about my life. While the search proceeded, I told him about our financial difficulties since my husband lost his prior job 8 months ago. I recounted finding a shoebox full of cash in our garage last week, which he said was from selling tools. The investigator jotted everything down and stated, "Desperate people do desperate things for money." He inquired whether my spouse had any connections to law enforcement or security work. I remembered him working as a temp at various security businesses throughout the years, but never staying for long. The foster home contacted that afternoon to say the girl was fine, but had awful dreams about her mother. They said she woke up screaming twice and repeatedly asked whether I was okay. Detective Moretti assisted me in arranging a visit to her the next day to retrieve items from her mother's car. I returned to the mall parking lot and saw the Peugeot still there, with a police seal on it. An officer met me there and allowed me to grab a cuddly bear and a blanket from the back seat. The next morning I visited the foster home, which was a little house with a swing set in the yard. When I stepped in, the girl ran to me and hugged me tightly for quite some time. I handed her the bear and blanket, and she pressed them against her face, inhaling the smell. We sat on the couch and she began narrating about the day her mother was stolen. She recalls driving past a water tower with a happy face painted on it just before they came to a stop. She stated that when they arrived at what appeared to be an old warehouse location, the fake cop's car was already waiting for them. This information assisted the police in determining which storage facilities to inspect, given there was only one such water tower in town. Detective Luca Moretti called me that night to say they had checked 4 storage facilities near the water tower. At one site they discovered zip ties and rope, as well as a receipt that had slipped under some crates. I didn't recognize the woman whose name appeared on the receipt. The name was Elena something, and the receipt was for cleaning goods purchased 3 weeks ago. 2 nights before the kidnapping, traffic camera footage showed my husband's truck at the identical storage units. The timetable was becoming clearer. And the evidence was mounting against him. I returned to the mother's Peugeot the next day, with permission to look for anything else useful. Under the driver's seat, I discovered a notepad with dates and locations written in fine handwriting. The notes detailed other phony cop events in 4 neighboring counties over the previous year. Each incident featured someone approaching women with children, pretending to be police, but wearing incorrect uniforms or badges. Detective Moretti ran the database and discovered reports that matched the descriptions, but no arrests had been made. He discovered that my husband had worked as a temp for the business that managed mall security contracts. His job records revealed that he had been assigned to our mall twice, which explains how he knew the blind spots. He would have discovered where all of the cameras were and which places security rarely patrolled. The girl gave another taped interview at the police station, this time with a child specialist present. She recalled more about the woman who was with the fictitious cop that day. The woman had a crescent moon tattoo on her wrist, which she discovered when she grasped her arm. She also noticed that the woman wrote something down with her left hand, which stood out to her. These details were entered to the case file, along with everything else they had obtained thus far. My husband kept phoning and messaging, but I didn't answer, following the detective's directions to leave everything on voicemail. His texts became angrier before transitioning to apologizing and expressing his love for me. The police claimed this pattern was typical of someone who was aware they had been apprehended. I stayed at the hotel another night, scarcely sleeping and wondering how I'd missed all the warnings. The following morning Detective Moretti called to say they had enough evidence to arrest my husband. They intended to pick him up at his employment that afternoon to prevent any complications. I felt horrible thinking about how our neighbors would react if they found out what he did. The investigator advised me to prepare myself because this would most likely hit the headlines. I returned to the hotel room and began browsing through my husband's belongings on our shared cloud account. His images automatically synced, and I went through hundreds of mundane business photos until I came across anything unusual. There were images from a bar from 4 weeks ago of a woman I had never seen before. She had her dark hair pulled back and was giggling at what my husband was saying. In one photo she was holding a drink, and I could plainly see her left wrist. The crescent moon tattoo was right there, just as the girl had described. My palms shook as I screenshotted everything and submitted it to Detective Moretti's email. He contacted me back within minutes, saying they had recognized her as Elena Varga using DMV information. The police obtained a warrant for her residence that same night. but when they came, she had already left. The landlord let them in, and the place was mostly vacant save from some furniture and rubbish. The neighbors reported seeing her moving boxes into a white vehicle at 3 a.m. 2 days ago. One neighbor recalls the van having a scratch in the back bumper and a parking sticker from the community college. Detective Moretti called the next morning to tell me that my husband would attempt to return home. They had officers watching our house in case he arrived. Around midday, he drove into our driveway in his pickup. When he noticed the unmarked police cars, he threw the truck into reverse and drove down the street. Officers pursued him on foot when he abandoned the truck and fled through the Weber's backyard. He hopped the fence and vanished into the woods behind our neighborhood. The police searched for hours with dogs, but he was familiar with the woods from years of jogging in them. They discovered his footsteps leading to the brook, but lost the trail after that. Detective Moretti informed me that I could no longer return to the hotel because my husband might have found out. They sent me to a separate safe house across town that afternoon. I packed my few belongings into garbage bags and left everything else behind. The new place was a little flat above a dry cleaner with bars over the windows. Isolation hit me hard that first night when I learned I couldn't call anyone or go anyplace. I knew it was for protection, but the loneliness was heartbreaking. 3 days later, the financial crimes team called with their findings regarding my husband's bank records. They discovered deposits from 4 separate companies, which revealed out to be fronts for unlawful skip tracing operations. These were not genuine bounty hunters, but criminals who kidnapped people for money without legal authority. The payments dated back 20 months and amounted more than $48,000. My husband had been doing this for more than a year, and I thought he was working extra hours at his normal job. The girl called me that night from her foster home crying so hard she couldn't breathe. Her foster mother called and reported she was experiencing nightmares and awoke screaming. I spoke with the girl and helped her count to 10 slowly while taking calm breaths. We repeated the breathing exercises her mother had given her until her crying subsided. She continued repeating she missed her mother and wanted to go home. I remained on the phone for 90 minutes till she fell asleep. Her foster mother thanked me and explained that the girl had been asking about me every day. 4 days later, Detective Moretti contacted with information concerning Elena's automobile. They found it abandoned in a downtown parking garage, with the plates removed. The crime scene team discovered blood on the passenger seat that matched the mother's DNA from medical records. The amount of blood suggested that she had been injured, but not dead. There were additional zip ties in the trunk and a roll of duct tape beneath the seat. The parking garage had cameras, but someone had spray-painted the lenses. Detective Moretti arrived to the safe house that afternoon to go over all we had learned so far. I finally told him the truth about it all. I recognized my husband as soon as the girl pointed him out, but my brain refused to believe it. I kept thinking there has to be an error or explanation. The investigator stated that denial is totally normal when someone you care about turns out to be harmful. He had seen it hundreds of times in domestic situations. He asked whether I'd be willing to assist them find my spouse since he might contact me. The plan would be to hold a meeting somewhere public with plenty of backup nearby. I was afraid but consented because I wanted this to be over. They would place a wire around me and have officers there wherever we met. My husband's text messages indicated that he was becoming desperate and might make a mistake. The detective swore not to allow anything happen to me. The following day, a victim advocate arrived to clarify my rights and ensure I knew what I was committing to. She was an older woman with kind eyes who had dealt with crime victims for 22 years. She inquired if I felt pressed to perform the operation, and I told her that I wanted to help. We discussed safety plans and signs to use if I felt unsafe. She gave me her cell phone number and told me I may change my mind at any time. Nobody would blame me if I chose not to go through with it. That night, my phone vibrated with a voice message from the girl. When I played it, her young voice filled my empty apartment, stating she was proud of me for helping catch the bad guy. She claimed her foster mother helped her record it, and she wanted me to know I was as brave as her mother had taught her. Her comments made my chest tighten, and I replayed the message 3 times while sitting on my kitchen floor, crying because this child who had gone through so much was attempting to make me feel better. The next morning, Detective Luca Moretti called to say they were ready to schedule the meeting with my husband and asked if I still wanted to go ahead with it. My hands shook as I said yes. And he said that officers in unmarked cars would be stationed throughout St. Clair Park as well as those dressed as joggers and dog walkers. He suggested that I contact my husband that I wanted to talk about our marriage and ask if he would meet me at St. Clair Park, near the playground where we first met. I sent the text with my fingers trembling so much that I had to retype it twice. He responded within 6 minutes, stating he'd be there at 2:15 and we could work things out. The detective arrived to the safe house and placed a little microphone under my shirt collar. He also showed me the hand signal to use if I felt endangered, which was to tap my left ear twice. 2 cops took me to the park in an unmarked sedan and left me off a block away, allowing me to walk to the meeting site while appearing natural. The playground was crowded with children on swings and parents on seats, which made me feel better knowing that there were witnesses everywhere, as well as undercover cops spread throughout. I sat on the bench where we had carved our initials 6 years before, trying to breathe normally while watching a mom push her toddler on the swing set. My husband arrived 12 minutes late, walking with a worse limp than previously, and his clothes appeared crumpled as if he had slept in his car. He sat down, keeping space between us, and immediately began talking about how Elena had forced him into everything by threatening to harm me if he didn't help her extort people for money. His version changed as he spoke. First maintaining he only drove the car, then admitting he helped restrain people while claiming he never hurt anyone seriously. I inquired about the girl's mother, and he looked about uneasily before leaning in and whispering that she was still alive, but only he knew where. He said he'd been feeding and watering her, but she needed medical attention soon, and he'd only provide the location if they guaranteed him a reduced sentence. The detective's voice came via my headset, instructing me to keep him talking. So when I inquired why he did it, he grabbed my wrist and said, "We needed the money for IVF treatments and a bigger house." His grip hurt, and I noticed 2 joggers shift course toward us. But then he let go and stepped up, explaining that he knew I was wearing a wire because I kept caressing my collar. He began to run, but his damaged leg slowed him down, and within seconds, 3 officers slammed him to the ground directly in front of the playground, where parents grabbed their children and rushed away. They handcuffed him while he yelled that the mother would die if they did not make a deal with him. But Detective Moretti simply read him his rights and placed him into a patrol car. Returning to the police station, my husband's lawyer arrived within an hour, wanting to consult with his client discreetly before any questioning. The investigator paced the corridor outside the interview room, checking his watch every few minutes, because every second was crucial in locating the mother alive. After 4 hours of discussions, the lawyer announced that his client would divulge the location in exchange for reducing the kidnapping accusation to unlawful imprisonment. The prosecutor continued to argue for 2 hours as I waited in the victim services room, drinking cold coffee and wondering about the mother who was suffering somewhere. Finally, they struck an agreement in which my husband would receive 14 years instead of 28 if the mother was discovered alive, and he testified against Elena and the others in the ring. He told them the address of a storage locker along Route D27 near the industrial sector. Within minutes, every available unit came to the scene, sirens blaring. The storage facility manager met them with bolt cutters, and they discovered the mother in Unit 52, bound to a metal chair with duct tape over her lips and zip ties around her wrists and ankles. She was conscious but weak due to dehydration, so paramedics started an IV right there in the storage unit while monitoring her vitals. They hurried her to the hospital, and Detective Moretti followed the ambulance to obtain her statement as soon as the doctors cleared her. The youngster was brought to the hospital with her foster mother and a counselor to reconcile with her mother, who was awake and crying despite being hooked up to monitors. They hugged each other for 25 minutes without saying anything while medical personnel examined them both for signs of injuries that required quick attention. The mother continued touching her daughter's face, as if she couldn't believe she was real, and the girl refused to let go of her mother's hand, even when the nurse wanted to adjust her IV. Meanwhile, the detective learned that Elena's credit card had been used at a petrol station 2 countries away, and traffic cameras captured her automobile driving toward the border. The investigation discovered she was part of a broader network of bogus cops who had been apprehending people for unlawful bounty hunting activities in 6 nations during the previous 4 years. That night, the local news broadcast a piece featuring my husband's mugshot. And then my phone started vibrating incessantly with calls and texts from reporters requesting interviews. By morning, someone had posted my photo and address online, claiming, "I must have known what my husband was doing and deserved to be in jail too." The harassment became so severe, with people calling me a kidnapper's wife and sending death threats, that I had to delete all of my social media accounts and change my phone number completely. The next morning, I went straight to the courtroom with all of the financial statements I'd gathered and filed for divorce, citing imminent danger and criminal behavior. The clerk also handed me restraining order documents which I filled out in the lobby while my hands were still shaking from everything. Within 3 hours, a judge signed an emergency order prohibiting my spouse from approaching me within 400 feet or contacting me in any way. The court also blocked our joint bank accounts pending an inquiry into the unlawful funds, so I couldn't access our savings, but he couldn't either. 4 days later, my husband's lawyer called the prosecutor's office, stating that his client wanted to make a deal and would release everyone involved in exchange for reduced charges. The prosecutor told me that they met for 7 hours, going back and forth on terms, while my husband sat there in his orange jumpsuit, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. He agreed to testify against Elena and 14 other members of the fake cop ring, in exchange for a reduction in his sentence from 28 to 17 years, with the prospect of parole in 12. The bargain made me ill, but Detective Luca Moretti emphasized that it was the only way to bring down the entire enterprise and spare the other victims. Meanwhile, the mother, Inspector Marie Keller, was dealing with her own issues, as the police department launched an internal inquiry into her previous cases because she had been a cop before. She had to sit through hours of interrogation regarding whether she had ever seen any evidence of this criminal network while on the force. The detectives searched over every arrest she'd made and report she'd filed to hunt for connections, but she cooperated entirely and answered all of their questions. She only wanted to focus on getting healthy and being there for her kid, who needed her more than ever after everything they'd been through. Clara was finally cleared by social services to return home with her mother, but only under rigorous monitoring, including weekly check-ins and mandatory therapy sessions. They moved into a smaller apartment near the hospital, where the mother could continue physical therapy for the injuries she sustained from being tied up for so long. The girl helped her mother with exercises every morning before school, and they began attending family counseling twice a week to work through the trauma together. The counselor taught them breathing exercises and grounding strategies for when their memories became too intense, which happened frequently at first. 6 weeks after all began, the police received a tip that Elena was at a coach station, attempting to purchase a ticket to Spain under a false name. Security cameras captured her wearing a wig and sunglasses, but the crescent tattoo on her wrist revealed her identity when she handed over cash for the ticket. Police intercepted the bus as she was boarding and discovered 3 bogus IDs in her purse, along with €9,000 in cash wrapped in elastic bands. She battled them and attempted to flee, but they tackled her right there on the platform, as several passengers videotaped everything on their phones. The preliminary hearing began 2.5 months later, and I had to testify about all I saw and knew, including confronting my husband in court for the first time since his imprisonment. I dressed my most professional suit and maintained a steady voice, even when his lawyer attempted to make me appear to be lying about not knowing anything. My spouse sat at the defense table in a suit that no longer fit him since he had lost weight while in jail, seeking to capture my attention. I told the court about finding the money in our garage, seeing him at the mall with the girl, and how he lied about being at work that day. The prosecutor displayed surveillance footage and phone records that corroborated everything I said, while my husband simply gazed at his hands on the table. After my testimony, I was walking to the parking garage when my husband's mother grabbed my arm and asked me to go visit him in jail. I pushed away and continued walking, but then my husband shouted out from where guards were escorting him back to the holding area after the hearing. He apologized and stated that he never intended for any of this to happen, but his apologies focused only on how difficult this was for him. He talked about his obligations, his fear, and how Elena had misled him. But he never mentioned the mother trapped in that storage unit, or the small child who had been sheltering alone in a car for 4 days. I turned away from him, as he continued to yell that he loved me until the guards carried him through the doors. Elena's preliminary hearing came the next week, and her lawyer was far more aggressive than my husband's in criticizing the evidence. He claimed that the storage unit receipt could have been fabricated and that the witness identifications were untrustworthy since the girl was distraught and I was biased. The judge dismissed 2 of the lesser accusations due to a lack of concrete evidence, but in a retained 22-year sentence. Elena sat there the entire time, expressionless, as if none of this mattered to her, which irritated me even more. After all of the court proceedings, I eventually began seeing a therapist because I couldn't sleep and kept experiencing panic attacks whenever I saw males who resembled my husband. The therapist's office had soft lighting and a white noise machine, but I still felt exposed discussing how stupid I felt for not knowing who I'd married. The kidnapping and conspiracy allegations, which may result. Sometimes I'd wake up at 3 a.m., convinced I'd heard him trying to come in, despite the fact that he was locked up. The therapist encouraged me to journal when I couldn't sleep, and the dreams gradually became less frequent, though they never fully disappeared. The youngster returned to school a month after reconciling with her mother, but it was difficult for her to acclimate to normal childhood activities again. Loud noises made her worry, and she couldn't stand being in busy halls between classes, so they let her leave 6 minutes early. Her instructor informed me that she was using coping strategies from therapy, such as counting to 10 and focusing on her breathing, when things became overwhelming. She even made friends with a shy girl who sat with her at lunch and didn't query why she had to depart unexpectedly. Detective Luca Moretti called me one day when I was moving boxes in my bedroom and informed me that Clara's mother needed work. He knew someone at a security company downtown who was hiring for desk job and asked if I could transport her to the interview because she still didn't have a car. I brought her up the next morning, and she was dressed in the last decent outfit she had left, a black blazer that hung loosely over her frame after everything she'd been through. The security company was located in a basic office building near the courthouse, and the manager greeted her politely. She received the job the same day, however it was just part-time and paid the minimum salary. 2.5 weeks later, the divorce papers arrived, and I signed them on my kitchen table without crying. The apartment I found across town was half the size of our old house, but the rent was low, and the neighbors kept to themselves. I put our wedding photos in a cardboard box and shoved it in the back of the closet where I wouldn't have to look at them. We donated the dinnerware we received as wedding gifts to Goodwill, as well as the matching towels and the silly throw pillows he chose. Moving day arrived and I loaded everything into a rental truck by myself because I didn't want anyone else's sympathy or assistance. The new house smelled like fresh paint and had water spots on the ceiling, but it was all mine. 4 months later, an envelope with Clara's handwriting arrived at my new address. Inside was an invitation to her birthday party, which they had been planning before everything went wrong. The party was held in a park near their new apartment and only 6 children attended, but everyone appeared to be truly joyful. Clara was wearing a new Pokemon shirt, and her mother had created a homemade cake that leaned to one side. They sang happy birthday, and the girl blew out her candles in one breath, as if she had been practicing. When she hugged me goodbye and said, "Thank you," I had to blink quickly to prevent from crying in front of everyone. A week later, another envelope arrived, this time from the state prison where my husband was being detained. His handwriting was weak, and the letter was 3 pages long, detailing his gambling problems and his fear of the people to whom he owed money. He described how Elena had promised him rapid cash and how he had convinced himself that no one would be seriously wounded. I read it once while standing by my mailbox, then walked directly to the dumpster and threw it away without responding. The trial dates were repeatedly pushed back, but ultimately, 8 months after that day at the mall, the penalties were reduced. Elena was sentenced to 9 years with the prospect of parole in 6, while my husband received a 17-year plea agreement. Clara and her mother had already moved into their own apartment, thanks to victim services and a foundation that assists crime survivors. The mother was working full-time at the security company and had even received a minor increase after her supervisor noticed how dependable she was. I was working 3 jobs, cashier at Metromart during the day, and stocking shelves at a grocery shop 4 nights a week. My back pained continuously, and I occasionally fell asleep standing up, yet the bills were paid even without his salary. Clara occasionally emailed me images of her school projects or her kitten, which they had gotten from the shelter. She was doing better in school, and her grades were mostly B's now that she could concentrate without being afraid all the time. Detective Moretti went by the Metromart where I worked one day to see how I was doing, and reported that they had arrested 2 more members of the fake officer ring. The most of them were now in prison, however he confessed that a couple were most likely in Spain, or somewhere they couldn't get. He handed me his card again and told me to contact if I ever felt endangered, but nothing unusual had occurred since the trials finished. 10 months after everything, I met someone at my second job who made me laugh for the first time in ages. He was well versed in my entire tale because it had circulated across the workplace. But he did not treat me as if I were broken or dangerous. We went for coffee after our shift one night, and he listened without judgment while I told him which portions of the gossip were incorrect. He had his own rough divorce, so he understood why I cringed when someone approached me too quickly. We took it slowly, and he never pushed when I said I needed time to comprehend everything. Inspector Keller called one day to inform me that she had been promoted to full-time supervisor at the security company, complete with benefits. Her voice sounded stronger than it had in months, and she invited me to see their apartment now that they had settled in. Clara had her own room with Pokemon posters and a desk, where she completed her homework every night without being questioned. She showed me the certificate she received for winning a school writing contest in which she wrote on the definition of true bravery. The article was about her mother encouraging her to recall information and stay smart when she was scared, and how being brave sometimes meant asking a stranger for assistance in a mall restroom. We all had wounds that would probably never go away, but we were creating something new out of what was left. I testified against my war, hero dad, while my brother's blood sugar monitors still beeped in court. The truth broke him before the verdict did. I was 13 when Dad abandoned me and my younger sister at his mother's place. He was leaving for Iraq for 9 months, and she was an alcoholic who had beaten us. The worst part was how, just 3 weeks ago, he fought tooth and claw to gain custody and separate us from Mom. The first week was hellish. Grandma would pass out on the couch by 4 p.m., leaving us to fend for ourselves. Luca had type 1 diabetes and needed insulin at 7 p.m., but Grandma was too drunk to remember. I attempted to help, but I was a youngster and had no idea what I was doing. Luca started getting sick more frequently. He'd throw up and become dizzy, but Grandma would simply urge him to quit being dramatic. We started arriving at school looking like garbage. Our clothes were soiled, and we were usually hungry since Grandma spent her money on whiskey, rather than groceries. I made excuses for her when teachers inquired about our appearance. The real trouble occurred when the neighbors saw. They'd notice us outside at odd hours, searching for food in their garbage cans. I remember knocking on one of their doors in the middle of the night and asking if they had any cold leftovers that they weren't going to eat. When the woman heard me, she seemed really sorrowful. "Where is your grandmother, sweetheart?" she questioned me. "She is sleeping. She sleeps a lot because she works so much," I explained. I was becoming better at lying. The neighbor woman began leaving sandwiches on our porch. Other neighbors did as well. And before I knew it, she had contacted Child Protective Services for us. A woman named Amelia Ward arrived to investigate. She seemed polite at first, asking us a lot of questions about Grandma. I wanted to tell her everything, but I was afraid of what Dad would do if he discovered we snitched. "Is your grandmother taking good care of you?" Amy asked. I looked at Luca, who was pale and wobbly from not taking his morning insulin. "Yeah, she takes good care of us," I'd said. But Amelia could tell we were starved and filthy. She took notes and indicated she would return to check on us. I hoped things would finally change. But then Dad came home on emergency leave after Amelia contacted him. He arrived in his full combat outfit, looking authoritative and frightening. Amelia was there waiting to speak with him, and I could tell she was nervous. "Sir, I've received some concerning reports about the children's care," she told me. Dad shut her off instantly. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I have served 4 tours in Iraq defending our country. I believe I understand how to choose proper care for my children. My mother reared me, and I turned out well." Amelia shifted uneasily. "I understand your service, sir, but the neighbors have reported signs of neglect. Those neighbors are just anti-military liberals who don't like having a veteran's family in their neighborhood," my dad added. His voice became louder and more hostile. "They're harassing my family while I'm overseas protecting their freedom." Amelia started to back down. She discussed her own son's deployment and the difficulties that military families face. Dad nodded as if they were great pals now. "My mother is a member of our family," Dad said. "She knows these kids better than some of our stranger neighbors. I trust her completely, and frankly I'm offended that people are trying to attack a veteran's family." Amelia apologized and stated she would not pursue it further. She left, and Dad returned to Iraq the next day. He drew me aside before leaving. "If you ever tell lies about Grandma again, you'll regret it," he told me. "Grandma made me strong, and she will make you tough too. Stop being weak." Things got a lot worse after that. Grandma's drinking grew, and she began laying hands on us when we requested food or reminded her about Luca's insulin. The neighbors continued to try to help, but they felt powerless because CPS had ignored their worries. Luca was getting progressively ill. Then the worst thing happened. Dad went on another deployment, and Grandma missed Luca's insulin for 2 days. I watched my younger brother degrade hour after hour. He was frequently puking up and couldn't remain awake. His breathing became very shallow. "Luca, you need to stay with me," I kept telling him, but he was drifting in and out of awareness. When he refused to wake up, I contacted 911. The paramedics took him to the hospital, where the doctor diagnosed diabetic ketoacidosis. They claimed he came close to death. A different social worker, Sophia Mueller, visited the hospital. She looked through Luca's medical records and noticed a pattern of missed insulin injections and mistreatment. She didn't care about Dad's military service or the fact that Grandma was family. "This is medical neglect, and it's life-threatening," she stated to me. "I'm filing an emergency petition with the judge today." She bypassed the local CPS office and went straight to family court. Before I knew it, Dad had been called, and he was back on a plane, ready to take me home. Dad's presence enveloped the hospital room like a storm cloud. He passed past Sophia without acknowledging her, his boots clicking on the linoleum floor. I saw him approach Luca's bed, where my younger brother was hooked up to monitors and IV drips. The devices beeped regularly, monitoring his heart rate and blood sugar levels, which the doctors were still attempting to normalize. "What has happened to my son?" Dad's voice had that deadly edge I knew all too well. He turned to face me, and my stomach dropped. His jaw was clenched, and I could see a muscle quivering beneath his skin. Sophia walked forward, clutching a big folder containing medical records. Mr. Callahan, your son nearly died of diabetic ketoacidosis. The hospital records indicate a trend of missed insulin injections over the last few weeks. Dad's eyes narrowed. He stiffened his shoulders, making himself appear even more imposing in his military fatigues. So, who exactly are you? My name is Sophia Miller, and I work as a social worker for the county. I've been appointed to look into this case of medical neglect. Medical neglect? Dad raised his voice slightly. My mother has been looking after these children while I serve our country. Any concerns about Luca's treatment are simply misconceptions. I squeezed against the wall, hoping to disappear. Sophia opened the folder and took out a few documents. Here are Luca's blood sugar diaries from past hospital trips. The pattern is clear. He'd been admitted 4 times in the previous month, all with dangerously high blood sugar levels. Dad grabbed the papers from her hands and swiftly scanned them. His expression darkened as he read each page. Where did you acquire this? They are part of Luca's medical record. Sophia stayed calm despite Dad's hostile demeanor. The door opened and a middle-aged woman entered, her graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. She glanced between Dad and Sophia before settling on Luca's chart. Mr. Hello, my name is Dr. Annika Novak. I have been treating your youngster. Dad quickly changed his approach, extended his hand with a practiced smile. Doctor, thank you for taking care of my son. When can we take him home? Dr. Novak did not reciprocate the smile. Mr. Callahan, your son almost died. His blood sugar level was over 580 when he arrived. He had a diabetic coma. This amount of negligence may have resulted in death. Neglect is a strong word, doctor. Dad's charm offensive continued. My mother is elderly, and occasionally forgets things. I'll make sure she receives better reminders about his insulin schedule. Dr. Novak shook her head. This extends beyond ordinary forgetfulness. Luca's A1C readings show that he has had poor blood sugar control for several months. He's terribly emaciated and appears dehydrated. These are signs of systemic neglect. I saw Dad's hands clench into fists at his sides. Sophia noticed as well and quickly positioned herself between Dad and the doctor. Mr. Callahan, we need to talk about alternative care arrangements for your children. What about alternative arrangements? Dad's voice lowered to a low growl. These are my kids. I decide what is best for them. The court will make that decision, Sophia stated firmly. I have already filed an emergency petition. There is a hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. Dad's face became red. He made a step toward Sophia, and I immediately shifted closer to Luca's bed. You have no rights. I serve this country by protecting people like you. And this is how you repay me? Dr. Novak pushed a button on the wall. Mr. Callahan, I'll have to ask you to lower your voice. This is the pediatric ward. 2 security guards appeared at the doorway. Dad noticed them and took a deep breath, apparently attempting to suppress his fury. He turned back to Sophia. This was a mistake. My mother raised me and my siblings properly. She is family. Family cares for family. Family doesn't let children nearly die from preventable medical emergencies, Sophia told me. The evidence is clear. Your mother is incapable of providing adequate care. Dad stared at me, and I noticed a difference in his expression. It was calculating, almost predatory. Son, tell them. Tell them how beautifully Grandma cares for you. My mouth became dry. I looked at Luca, who was still unconscious on the hospital bed, and at Sophia, who was watching me with concern. Dr. Novak walked closer to me, establishing a subtle barrier between Dad and where I was standing. My voice broke. I cleared my throat and tried again. Grandma drinks a lot. The words hung in the air like a confession. Dad's face changed from crimson to purple. Boy, you have no idea what you are saying. You're perplexed and scared. Sophia stepped forward. Let him speak, Mr. Callahan. But I couldn't say anything more. My throat felt as though it was closing up. Dad's look pierced through me, and I knew there would be consequences later. There always was. Dad pulled the "I served my country" card faster than a magician with a rabbit, except that instead of solving problems, he's making everyone uncomfortable while his children are connected to more gadgets than a gaming setup. Dr. Novak interfered. I believe we should give Luca a rest. Mr. Callahan, your visiting hours are about to end. I'm not leaving my son, Dad stated flatly. Actually, given the circumstances, I think it's best if the children have some space, Sophia told me. She took out her phone. I can have security escort you out if necessary. Dad's jaw worked silently for a time, then he grinned, but not with his eyes. Fine, I'll leave. But it's not over. I'll see you in court tomorrow and we'll see what the judge thinks of someone attempting to break up a military family. He approached the door, hesitated, and returned my gaze. I'll be staying at Grandma's tonight. We have a lot to talk. After he went, my entire body began shaking. Sophia sat in the chair next to me and gently touched my shoulder. You did the correct thing. I know that was difficult. He's going to call me, I said quietly. No, he is not. You are not going back there tonight. I've arranged for an emergency placement. You will remain somewhere safe until the hearing. Dr. Novak checked Luca's monitors again. He should awaken soon. His blood sugar is normalizing beautifully, but he will need ongoing care. No more missed dosages. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. I attempted to help him. I truly did. But I didn't know how to use the insulin pen correctly. And Grandma would be upset if I touched her belongings. None of this is your fault, Dr. Novak stated firmly. You're 13 years old. You should not be liable for your brother's medical care. Sophia's phone vibrated. She examined it and grimaced. Your father has phoned my supervisor. He claims I am discriminating against him because of his military service. Is it going to work? I inquired, fear creeping back in. No, the medical data is overwhelming, but he is going to fight this hard. She looked at me gravely. I need you to prepare for tomorrow. The judge will want to hear from you. I cannot testify against Dad. He will never forgive me. You will not be testifying against him. You will disclose the truth about what happened to Luca. There is a difference. But I knew Dad wouldn't view things that way. In his world, commitment to family meant being silent at all times. Breaking the code represented the ultimate treachery. A quiet groan emanated from the bed. Luca's eyes flickered open, unfocused and perplexed. Where am I? I jumped up and took his hand. You are in the hospital. You got terribly sick. But you'll be okay. He took a careful glance around at the machinery and IV lines. My head hurts. Dr. Novak walked to his side and examined his pupils with a little light. That is normal, Luca. You've been really unwell, but you're improving now. Where is Grandma? He asked. Sophia and I exchanged looks. She's at home, I explained cautiously. Good. Luca muttered. She was really mad about something. I don't remember what. Sophia wrote another note in her file. Every detail mattered now, as we built the argument that would define our future. I sat back down, still holding Luca's hand, and tried not to think about what Dad was doing at Grandma's place, probably coaching her on what to say and ensuring their stories were consistent. Sophia organized an emergency placement at a foster family approximately 30 minutes from the hospital. The family appeared pleasant enough. The Harrisons, an older couple, lived in a quiet house that smelled like vanilla candles. They led me to a small bedroom that contained a twin bed and a desk. The bathroom is down the hall, Mrs. Harrison murmured softly. There are clean towels in the closet. Are you hungry? I shook my head, despite the fact that I had not eaten anything all day. My stomach was too twisted from anxiousness to handle meals. After they went, I sat on the side of the bed staring at my hands. They still shook slightly. I could not sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dad's face in the hospital room. How his expression changed from charm to wrath and back again. I knew he was plotting something. He always had a plan. The next morning, Mrs. Harrison drove me to the courthouse. The structure was old and frightening, with massive columns and large wooden doors. Sophia greeted us in the lobby, holding a heavy briefcase. How is Luca? I inquired instantly. He's doing well. Still in the hospital but improving. Dr. Novak will testify via phone about his condition. She guided us through security and down a lengthy hallway. The hearing is in family court. It's less formal than regular court, but you have to speak the truth. We entered a small courtroom with wood paneling and fluorescent lighting. Dad was already present, sitting at a table with a man in a suit who must have been his lawyer. Grandma sat behind them in the gallery, dressed for church and looking more sober than I had seen her in months. Dad had also cleaned up. His uniform was neatly pressed, and he had shaved thoroughly. He appeared to be the ideal soldier, the type of person you'd trust with everything. He did not glance at me when we sat at the opposite table. The judge entered, an elderly woman with short gray hair and glasses perched above her nose. She read the documents in front of her before gazing up into the courtroom. This is an emergency hearing for custody of 2 small children. I have studied both the petition and the medical records. Let us start with the social worker's report. Sophia rose and began presenting the evidence. She was meticulous and clinical, outlining the history of neglect, including missing insulin injections and several hospitalizations. She showed us images of our living conditions at Grandma's house, including the empty refrigerator and the bottles stashed throughout the rooms. Dad's lawyer objected multiple times, claiming that the images were taken without permission, that the medical records were being misconstrued, and that this was a deliberate attack on a military family. The judge overruled most of his concerns while allowing him to present his arguments. When it was time for Dad to speak, he transformed. The irate man from the hospital was no longer among us. In his place stood a dedicated father, exhausted from war service, doing his best in hard circumstances. Your Honor, I have served 4 deployments in Iraq. I have given everything for my country and my children. When their mother proved inadequate, I battled for custody to provide them with stability. I trusted my mother to care for them while I served our country. He went on to discuss the difficulties that military families face, the absence of support structures, and the judgment of civilians who do not comprehend sacrifice. Several times he cited his medals, commendations, and impeccable service record. Grandma testified next, and I barely recognized her. She expressed her love for us openly, stating that she had done her best despite her age and health concerns. She agreed to being forgetful on occasion, but denied frequent drinking. She said the bottles in the images were old and from before we moved in. Then it was my turn. My legs felt like jello as I approached the witness stand. The judge smiled at me warmly. Tell the truth, son. That's all we need. Dad's lawyer began with simple inquiries about my name, age, and how long I had lived with Grandma. Then he got to the hard part. Did your grandmother ever abuse you? I looked at Dad. Although his countenance was neutral, I could see the caution in his eyes. Sometimes she gets upset. That wasn't what I requested. Has she ever physically harmed you? My hands clutched the edge of the witness box. Yes. Could you be more specific? I detailed some of the occurrences as calmly as I could. The lawyer attempted to reduce each one, implying that I was exaggerating or misremembering. But Sophia had prepared me for this, so I adhered to the truth. How about your father? How is he treating you? This was a minefield. I chose my words carefully. He has high expectations. Does he love you? Yes. Does he want the best for you? I paused. The judge leant forward slightly. You can take your time. He wants us to be strong, I finally explained. He thinks Grandma's house makes us strong. The lawyer pressed on, but I had found my beat. I responded frankly but cautiously, attempting to construct a picture without openly accusing Dad of anything that might elicit retaliation. Dr. Novak's testimony was later delivered via telephone in the courtroom. She was forthright about Luca's condition and the extent of the mistreatment. She used medical words that I didn't understand, but her conclusion was clear. Luca could have died, and would die if put back in the same position. The judge questioned Dad directly about the medical neglect. He had an answer to everything. Grandma was becoming old and needed help remembering. He had attempted to establish support services, but the military bureaucracy was slow. He had no idea how awful things had gotten because no one had informed him. Your son tried to tell a social worker weeks ago, the judge said. Your Honor, children sometimes exaggerate to get attention. They have had a difficult time during my deployment. They are acting out. The hearing lasted for hours. Each side provided evidence, made arguments, and pointed fingers. Throughout it all, I observed Dad execute. He was skilled at moving between devoted father, wounded veteran, and victim of an unfair system when necessary. Finally, the judge asked for a recess to make her ruling. We waited in the hallway, Sophia talking quietly on the phone with her supervisor, Dad and his lawyer scheming in a corner, and Grandma sitting on a seat, looking older and more vulnerable than normal. When we returned to the courtroom, the judge appeared serious. It's a tricky case. On the one side we have a man serving his nation while trying to provide for his children in difficult circumstances. On the other side, we have compelling medical proof of life-threatening neglect. She continued, stating the facts as she saw them. My heart beat as she approached her decision. The court finds that returning the children to their grandmother's care would pose an immediate risk to their health and safety. The judge was creating tension as if she were holding a reality show finale, but Luca's life was on the line. Now that's what I call courtroom drama with bad timing. Someone needed to inform her that this wasn't Europe's got custody. Temporary custody is granted to the Department of Children's Services pending a full investigation and permanent custody hearing. Dad shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is incorrect. These are my kids. Sit down, Mr. Callahan, or I'll hold you in contempt. The judge's voice was steely. You'll be able to provide a complete plan for their care during the permanent hearing. Until then, kids will remain in foster care. She scheduled the next hearing for 4 months out, giving Dad time to make plans that did not involve Grandma. As we left the courthouse, Dad grabbed my arm. This isn't over, he stated gently. You are still my son. Remember that. Sophia intervened and led me away, but I could feel his gaze on my back as we walked down the corridor. I knew he was already plotting his next move. Dad always had a plan. The drive back to the Harrisons' house seemed unreal. Mrs. Harrison continued looking at me in the rearview mirror, her eyes filled with anxiety. I peered out the window, seeing familiar streets pass by, knowing Dad was somewhere out there, planning his next move. Back at the foster home, I attempted to eat the sandwich Mrs. Harrison prepared, but my hands trembled. Every car passing outside made me jump. I knew Dad's strategy. He'd start small, probing boundaries and discovering flaws. The first sign appeared that evening. Mr. Harrison responded to a knock at the door, and I heard Dad's voice, calm and sensible. My blood turned icy. I crept to the top of the stairs, listening as Dad stated that he only wanted to check on his son and make sure I was comfortable. Mr. Harrison respectfully but firmly informed him that visits were to be arranged through Sophia. Dad thanked him for taking care of me, his voice tinged with false gratitude. After he went, Mrs. Harrison discovered me hunched on the steps. She assisted me back to my room and perched on the edge of the bed. I told her about Dad's methods. He'd charm them first, making them believe he was sensible. She listened intently and swore they'd be careful. The next morning, Sophia called. Dad had filed a complaint with her boss, alleging she had broken protocol and had a particular grudge against military families. He had also called the foster care licensing board, accusing the Harrisons of poisoning me against him. Sophia told me that these tactics would not work, but I could sense the strain in her voice. At the hospital, Luca was improving. The nurses allowed me to sit with him as he ate his first solid meal in days. He inquired about Grandma again, and I informed him that she was ill and couldn't visit. It was not wholly a falsehood. Dr. Novak taught me how to correctly administer insulin, something I had anxiously attempted to figure out on my own at Grandma's place. The situation became more serious on the second day. Dad arrived at the hospital during my visit with Luca. He entered wearing his formal uniform, medals sparkling. The nurses nearly swooned. He brought Luca a teddy bear and me a book about military heroes. He acted like the ideal father, inquiring about Luca's care and lavishly thanking the nurses for their efforts. He pulled me aside near the vending machines. His grasp on my shoulder appeared kind to anyone observing, but his fingers pushed in deep. He spoke quietly about family loyalty, disappointment, and how much easier things could have been if I had just revealed the truth. When Sophia arrived for her regular visit, Dad was sitting by Luca's bed, reading him a story, the epitome of fatherly devotion. That night, the Harrisons got several phone calls. The first couple were hang-ups. Then came calls from Dad's military buddies, who explained what a terrific man he was, and how everything was a misunderstanding. One caller claimed the Harrisons didn't understand military families, and were being exploited by a disgruntled youngster. The psychological assault intensified throughout the next week. Dad filed a formal complaint with the military, alleging Sophia harassed him and interfered with his service. He launched a social media campaign, sharing photographs of himself in uniform, along with carefully phrased words about fighting for his children and defending his nation. Comments rushed in to support the loyal soldier parent who is being persecuted by the system. Military recruiters suddenly became highly interested in visiting my classrooms at the school I'd started attending after leaving the foster family. They'd share stories about honor, devotion, and family values. One person expressed how painful it was when children deceived their parents. The message was plain. Dad began showing up everywhere, maintaining a legal distance yet making his presence felt. He'd be in the grocery store when Mrs. Harrison took me there. He would drive by the school during recess. He'd sit in the hospital cafeteria during my visits with Luca, reading a newspaper and never approaching, but always watching. Everyone was feeling the pressure. The Harrisons began receiving bad feedback on their foster care profile from unknown sources. Sophia's supervisor summoned her to many meetings to discuss the allegations. Even Dr. Novak admitted that someone had questioned her medical license, implying that she was misrepresenting Luca's health. 2 weeks before the permanent custody court, Dad made his most daring move. He scheduled an interview with a local TV station about the issues that military families face. He sat in his apartment, surrounded by images of us and his military honors, speaking eloquently about the sacrifices he had made and how the system failed veterans. He never brought up the mistreatment or Luca's near-death experience. Instead, he portrayed a picture of a loyal father who was punished for serving his nation. The interview aired in prime time. Within hours, Sophia's office was inundated with calls supporting Dad. The Harrisons began receiving comments on their car windshield calling them unpatriotic. Someone spray-painted, "Support our troops" on their garage door. I felt the walls close in. Dad was winning the public relations battle. He had transformed us into symbols, me as the ungrateful child and himself as the tormented hero. Sophia warned me that he was preparing a case claiming the entire system was prejudiced against him. Luca was hospitalized for a longer period of time than predicted. His blood sugar levels spiked anytime he became agitated, which happened every time Dad visited. Dr. Novak chronicled everything, noting that Luca's uneasiness appeared to be directly tied to his father's presence. Dad responded by calling in a private specialist, who stated that Luca's health was worsened by the trauma of being removed from his family. The foster home became a pressure cooker. Mr. Harrison began having problems at work after someone called and suggested he was hiding a child who had been trained to lie about a war hero. Mrs. Harrison discovered her automobile tires slashed one morning. They never said anything to me, but I could see the pressure on their faces. Dad's lawyer filed several letters asking increased visitation, psychiatric testing to prove I was coached, and speedy custody return. Each letter was forwarded to Sophia's managers, the judge, and several military advocacy organizations. The lawyer described a pattern of systemic prejudice against a decorated veteran. 3 weeks into foster care, I made a life-changing decision. I began keeping a journal, writing down all I remembered about living at Grandma's place. I wrote about finding empty insulin bottles beneath couch cushions, trying to wake Grandma to rescue Luca, and hiding injuries with long sleeves. I provided dates, timings, and particular instances. It was unpleasant to recall, but I knew memories could be questioned. Written documents were more difficult to ignore. Sophia assisted me in submitting the journal to the court, but Dad's lawyer instantly questioned its validity. He claimed that I had been trained to write it and that the timing was suspect. He ordered handwriting analysis and psychological tests to see if I was being controlled. The psychiatric evaluation was exhausting. The court-appointed psychologist questioned me about my relationships with my father, grandmother, and mother. Dad had prepared well for this, having already submitted his own psychiatric evaluation from a military psychiatrist who confirmed his mental fitness and commitment to his children. During my review, I sought to balance truth and self-preservation. I knew Dad would read every word in the report. I had to be honest enough to protect Luca while yet being cautious enough not to provoke Dad's worst retribution. The psychologist observed my hypervigilance, desire to dismiss unfavorable events, and protective instincts around Luca. She stated that these were consistent with a child who had taken on adult responsibilities too soon. Dad's lawyer framed this as evidence of coaching, claiming Sophia had trained me to exhibit these symptoms. Meanwhile, Luca's illness became the main battleground. Dad called in medical experts, who testified that diabetes treatment can be difficult for older caregivers, and that missed doses are not inherently neglectful. They claimed that Luca's health had been exacerbated by the stress of being apart from his family. Dr. Novak fought back using real data. She exhibited Luca's blood sugar logs, which revealed a clear pattern of worsening under Grandma's care versus improvement at the hospital. She described how near Luca had been to death and how diabetic ketoacidosis could result in lifelong organ damage. However, Dad's experts contended that the hospital setting alone could explain for the improvement. The community pressure increased. A veterans advocacy group launched a petition demanding Dad's complete custody. They staged rallies outside the courts, waving national flags and holding posters advocating for military families. Luca's blood sugar spikes every time Dad paid a visit were his body's way of submitting its own custody complaint. I guess even diabetes understands when to take a side in this mess. Local politicians began to weigh in, taking care not to appear anti-veteran. One especially horrible night, someone threw a rock through the Harrisons' glass. A message was attached, describing them as traitors who were ruining a military family. The police arrived, took a complaint, but indicated they couldn't do much because there were no witnesses. I overheard Mr. Harrison discussing with his wife whether they could continue fostering me. Dad stepped up his effort by reaching out to military media sites. He conducted interviews regarding the unique issues that deployed parents face, as well as how the system fails to recognize military culture. He spoke movingly about missing birthdays and holidays while serving overseas, and how all he wanted was to be home with his children. The story was shifting. Instead of a parent who had put his children at danger, Dad had become a symbol of how the country had failed its veterans. Online forums erupted with support for him. People who had never met us had strong views about our family. Sophia was overwhelmed with papers and complaints. Her supervisor tasked another employee with reviewing her handling of the situation. Dad's counsel said Sophia had a bias against military families, citing a case from years ago in which she removed children from another veteran's house. At school, I felt alienated. My father's identity had circulated, and children either avoided me or accused me of being anti-patriotic. Teachers regarded me with pity or distrust. One replacement instructor made a harsh remark about children who did not value their parents' contributions. The Harrisons attempted to protect me, but I could see them cracking. They had fostered scores of children over the years, but they had never experienced this amount of persecution. Mrs. Harrison started experiencing panic attacks. Mr. Harrison installed security cameras after finding their garbage cans overturned several times. 6 weeks into foster care, Dad pulled out his ace. He announced his retirement from the service in order to devote more time to his children. He gave a press conference in the Veterans Hall, accompanied by other warriors. He discussed prioritizing his children over his career, the greatest sacrifice for a soldier. He brought a job offer from a local security agency, demonstrating his ability to give stable employment. This altered the entire dynamic. The main reason for keeping us in foster care was Dad's deployments. Now, he was erasing that barrier, portraying himself as a parent who had sacrificed all for his children. The veterans community rallied even more strongly around him. Luca was finally moved from the hospital to a specialized medical foster home. Dad's lawyer argued that my presence might encourage Luca to say terrible things about their father, so I was only allowed supervised visits from now on. Luca appeared bewildered and introverted throughout our few visits. He kept asking when we could go home, even though he couldn't explain where home was anymore. The permanent custody hearing loomed like a storm. Dad's attorney filed petition after motion, requesting access to all medical records, every correspondence between Sophia and her superiors, and any notes from foster families. He was arguing that the entire system was conspiring against a military hero. Sophia worked frantically to counter every action. She obtained affidavits from neighbors who had witnessed the mistreatment, collated Luca's complete medical history, and documented Dad's pattern of manipulation and intimidation. However, for every piece of evidence Sophia offered, Dad's team provided a counter-narrative. The weekend before the hearing, Dad made one last effort. He planned a candlelight vigil outside the courthouse, billed as a prayer meeting for separated military families. Hundreds of people attended. The local media reported it extensively. He talked about forgiveness, healing, and bringing his family back together. He even urged that he seek counseling to be a better father. I felt terrible as I watched the news report from the Harrisons' living room. Dad had successfully changed the narrative from one of kid endangerment to one of government overreach. He had weaponized his military experience, using public opinion as a shield. Mrs. Harrison sat alongside me with her hand on my shoulder. She assured me that the truth would eventually come out, and that the judge would see through the trickery. But I could sense doubt in her eyes. We all understood how powerful Dad's story had become. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Luca, and how many more times his blood sugar would drop if we went back. I thought of Grandma, who had been fairly silent throughout, most likely because Dad had taught her to maintain her image. Sophia called early in the morning with updates. Dad had filed letters of support from dozens of military men, community leaders, and even a state senator. He had completed a parenting class and received certificates to show it. He'd scheduled Luca's future medical appointments with a reputable endocrinologist. On paper, he appeared to be a rehabilitated father who had done everything well. As Mrs. Harrison drove me to the courthouse, I noticed the masses already gathered. Veterans in uniform, family waving flags, and news vans lined the roadway. Dad had turned the custody hearing into a political event. Inside the courthouse, the mood was tight. The small courtroom was filled with Dad's supporters. They donned yellow ribbons and military pins. When Dad entered in his dress uniform, they stood in admiration. He'd planned every aspect properly. Sophia squeezed my hand while we took our seats. She warned me that this would be difficult, and that Dad would pull out all the stops. But seeing the entire scope of his effort was astounding. He'd transformed public opinion into a weapon, and he was using it against everybody who stood in his way. The judge appeared, and I could see her looking around the filled courtroom with concern. She reminded everyone that this was about the well-being of 2 children, not politics or public opinion. But I pondered how she could possibly disregard Dad's insistence. As the hearing began, I figured Dad had one more surprise in store. But it would be revealed soon enough. For the time being, I sat between Sophia and Mrs. Harrison, trying to keep my breathing calm, knowing that everything we'd fought for over the previous 2 months was about to be decided. The real war has barely begun. The judge summoned Dad's surprise witness to the stand. A man in military dress blues moved forward, his chest adorned with ribbons and medals. He identified himself as Colonel Peter Holm, Dad's previous commanding officer. My heart dropped as he continued to describe Dad's exceptional service record, including his leadership under fire and loyalty to his unit. Colonel Holm portrayed Dad as a hero who rescued lives in combat and gave everything for his country. He talked on the psychological impact of deployment and how soldiers struggled to return to normal life. He indicated that Dad's parenting failures were symptoms of his service, rather than character faults. Sophia opposed, stating that military service did not excuse child irresponsibility. The court permitted the hearing to proceed while reminding everyone that the focus was on the children's safety, not Dad's military record. Dad's lawyer then called several character witnesses. Fellow servicemen spoke of Dad's honesty. His landlord referred to him as a model renter. His new boss at the security firm commended his work ethic and dependability. Each testimony supported the story of a fine man being unfairly victimized. When Sophia's turn came to offer rebuttal evidence, she concentrated on medical facts. She presented Luca's complete hospital records, which revealed not only the latest crisis, but also a pattern of emergency room visits dating back months. She showed photos of Luca taken at each admittance, demonstrating his rapid deterioration under Grandma's care. The most devastating proof arrived from an unexpected source. A nurse from Luca's previous hospital trips had taken personal notes on our health. She documented bruising, starvation, and Luca's recurrent complaints about being hungry and missing his insulin. Her notes predate any custody dispute, which makes them more difficult to reject as prejudiced. Dad's lawyer questioned the nurse's integrity, claiming she had violated patient privacy by making personal notes. He claimed that her observations were subjective and unprofessional. But the harm had been done. An impartial third party had documented the pattern of neglect, which was shown to the judge. Dr. Novak testified again, but this time in person. She presented Luca's blood test results, describing in detail how persistent high blood sugar levels affected organs. She exhibited brain scans that revealed early signs of diabetes-related impairment. She stated unequivocally that transferring Luca to an environment in which his medical needs were disregarded would most certainly result in irreversible disability or death. Dad's medical expert attempted to downplay the findings, claiming that the harm was reversible with careful treatment. He highlighted that Dad had already planned for Luca to receive good medical treatment in the future. Dr. Novak, on the other hand, provided statistics on diabetic youngsters who had experienced ketoacidosis on multiple occasions. The fatality numbers were dismal. The court then heard from the court-appointed child advocate, Mrs. Elise Laurent, who had been designated to represent Luca's interests. She had interviewed Luca several times and observed how he interacted with other family members. Her report was detrimental to Dad's case. Mrs. Laurent described Luca's fear responses when his father's name was spoken. She documented how Luca's blood sugar levels rose during Dad's hospital stays. She had witnessed Luca having nightmares about returning to Grandma's place. Most crucially, she had recorded Luca stating that he felt protected for the first time at the medical foster home. Dad's composure finally broke. He stood up, defying his lawyer's attempts to stop him, and confronted the judge directly. Colonel Holm had trotted out the complete military resume as if it were a free pass from child endangerment charges. Because nothing says good parenting like listing your military medals while your child's brain scans show evidence of medical negligence. He discussed the difficulty of command, specifically making life or death decisions in war. He maintained that while his methods may appear harsh to bystanders, they were intended to produce strong, robust youngsters capable of surviving in a hostile world. The judge had to threaten Dad with contempt charges to get him to sit down. His outburst had harmed his carefully cultivated image. Some of his followers in the gallery appeared uneasy. The loyal father's mask had slipped, revealing the domineering soldier underneath. Sophia summoned her final witness, me. I walked to the witness stand on trembling knees, knowing that this was my last chance to safeguard Luca. Dad's lawyer instantly protested, claiming I had previously testified. The judge overruled him, noting that fresh evidence had been offered, which I could address. Sophia questioned me about the journal I had kept. I mentioned how I began documenting things after understanding that my memory may be challenged. I revealed specific instances, such as discovering Luca unconscious on the bathroom floor, Grandma being too drunk to wake up when I shouted for help, and attempting to contact 911, only to have Grandma pull the phone from the wall. When I begged for aid, my father called from Iraq and told me to handle it like a man. Dad's lawyer cross-examined me aggressively. He implied that I'd been taught to write the journal, and Sophia had directed me what to include. He pointed out irregularities in dates, hinting that I was lying. He questioned why I hadn't informed teachers or other adults if things were indeed that horrible. I detailed Dad's threats and how he convinced me that foster care would be worse than Grandma's place. I shared my dread of being removed from Luca and being blamed for splitting up our family. I discussed trying to safeguard Luca myself because I didn't trust anyone else to do so. The lawyer pressed harder, attempting to persuade me that I had exaggerated or lied, but I had the truth on my side. Every incident I mentioned was authentic and vividly remembered. When he argued that I was exaggerating Luca's health, I detailed how my little brother's lips turned blue, his breathing became shallow, and I thought he was dying in my arms. The judge eventually interfered, asking the lawyer to move on, but I could tell she was moved by my evidence. Several others in the gallery were wiping away tears, even some of Dad's fans. During a brief recess, I overheard angry conversations in the corridor. Some of Dad's veteran pals were bickering amongst themselves. The story was fracturing. Supporting a fellow soldier was one thing. Endangering children was another. The medical data was too compelling to ignore. When we reconvened, Dad's lawyer delivered his closing argument. He admitted that mistakes had been made, but contended that they were fixable. He stressed Dad's military service, sacrifice, and determination to improve. He portrayed an image of a family that could heal if given the opportunity. Sophia's conclusion was logical and factual. She described the history of neglect, the rising medical crises, and the pattern of manipulation and intimidation. She claimed that Dad had consistently prioritized his image over his children's safety. She requested that the judge examine what would happen the next time Luca's blood sugar dropped if we were restored to Dad's care. The judge said that she will make her decision following a brief recess. Those 30 minutes seemed like hours. I sat between Sophia and Mrs. Harrison, trying to avoid looking at Dad. His supporters had become quieter, with some leaving the courtroom entirely. When the judge returned, she had a grave countenance. She began by noting the case's complexities, including the competing interests at stake. She acknowledged Dad's commitment to the country, but emphasized that military service did not exempt him from parental responsibility. She evaluated the medical evidence and found it both persuasive and unsettling. She noticed the pattern of worsening neglect, the several possibilities for Dad to act, and his decision to prioritize his job over his children's welfare. She believed Grandma was unfit to offer care owing to her alcoholism and history of physical abuse. The judge then addressed Dad's latest attempts to recover custody. While she recognized the excellent efforts he had taken, she felt they were insufficient given the severity of his previous negligence. She was especially concerned about his attempts to sway public opinion and intimidate witnesses. Her ruling was decisive. Permanent custody was granted to the Department of Children's Services. Dad's parental rights were not terminated, but any subsequent contact would necessitate extensive rehabilitation and supervised visits. Grandma was barred from having unsupervised contact with us. Dad erupted. He yelled about injustice and a system that discriminates against veterans. Security approached him, but his lawyer managed to calm him down. As they took him out, he looked at me with such venom that I knew this was not over. Not for him. The courtroom slowly emptied. Sophia hugged me with tears in her eyes. She offered to get us a decent permanent position, perhaps even together, if we were lucky. Mrs. Harrison hugged my shoulder and told me how brave I'd been. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had mostly dispersed. A few demonstrators remained, but their enthusiasm had waned. The plot had grown too sophisticated for simplistic slogans about supporting troops. Children's lives were at risk. The harassment stopped after a few days. The phone calls ended. The vandalism has halted. Dad's tail had crumbled under the weight of evidence. Some of his followers even apologized, claiming they didn't know the whole story. Luca and I were placed together in a therapeutic foster family led by a couple who had previously worked with damaged youngsters. They knew Luca's medical needs and had processes in place to manage his diabetes. For the first time in months, I slept through the night without thinking about insulin schedules. Dad attempted one final persuasion. He wrote me a letter through his lawyer, not to the court. He wrote of forgiveness, family relationships, and how I would come to regret my decisions as I grew older. He proposed that when I became 18, we might reconnect without the court's intervention. I presented the letter to my therapist. We talked about manipulative strategies and how abusers frequently presented themselves as victims. She helped me realize that protecting Luca was not treachery. It was love. True love, not the warped version Dad had taught us. 8 months later, Luca's health had stabilized. His blood sugar was stable, and his weight was normal. The brain damage from the diabetic coma was modest, but he will always require extra assistance with specific tasks. He smiled and played again, acting like the child he was meant to be. I entered high school in a different district. Nobody knew our story. I was simply a kid, not the ungrateful son who had betrayed a military hero. I made pals who had no idea about military culture or family loyalty tests. I had never anticipated such freedom. Dad finally quit arguing. His lawyer informed the court that he was focusing on his new career and would not seek more custody actions. I feared the legal bills had grown too much, or that his new job didn't appreciate the attention. Regardless, the calls and letters ceased. Grandma began a rehab program, but I doubted it would last. She had been drinking for longer than I had lived. But she was at least safe from other vulnerable children. That's what mattered. The permanent foster family that took us in helped us celebrate birthdays and holidays without the pressure of Dad's expectations. They taught us that discipline did not require fear, and that strength did not imply tolerating abuse. They demonstrated what stable, sober caregivers looked like. I still have nightmares occasionally. I wake up believing I hear Dad's boots in the hall or Grandma tripping over furniture. But then I recall where I am. Luca is secure in the next room, and his insulin is properly stored and supplied on time. I last saw Dad at a grocery store 2 years later. He was dressed in civilian clothes and appeared to be older and smaller. Our gazes met across the produce section. For a second, I thought he may approach. Instead, he turned to walk away. I realized I was no longer terrified. Luca has very few memories of Grandma's house, which is a good thing. He is aware that he has diabetes, that he nearly died, and that we are currently living with foster parents. However, the details have disappeared. He is preoccupied with soccer practice and math homework, as is typical of a child. I still have the journal I wrote during those gloomy months, not to relive the trauma, but to reflect on how far we have come. To remind myself that telling the truth is not treachery, and that protecting the vulnerable is not weakness. Dad was mistaken about what makes someone strong. Sophia still checks in on occasion. She informs me that our situation altered how the county handles military families in difficulty. When military members complain about bias, they must now provide more documentation. They take a deeper look at medical neglect, even when it is disguised with patriotic rhetoric. Last year, the Harrisons sent out a Christmas card. They have successfully fostered 2 additional children after me. They claimed that I had taught them about courage, despite the fact that I had felt anything but brave during those dreadful weeks at home. They claimed they still had my room available in case I needed it. I'm now applying to universities, intending to study social work. My guidance counselor feels my article about overcoming adversity is fascinating, but she doesn't know the entire story. I write about resilience and protecting others, leaving away specifics but conveying true emotions. Luca aspires to be a doctor, inspired by Dr. Anika Novak, who saved his life. He volunteers at diabetes camps, teaching young people how to manage their condition. He explains that taking insulin is not a sign of weakness. It is what keeps them strong enough to achieve their objectives. I sometimes wonder what Dad tells himself about losing us. Whether he continues to portray himself as the victim, the tortured veteran betrayed by ungrateful children, or whether, in quiet moments, he recalls Luca unconscious in that hospital bed and feels the weight of his decisions. But I don't really think about Dad. I am focused on my future, Luca's health, and creating a life free of manipulation and fear. We survived. We are safe. We are united. That was more than I could have hoped for during the dreadful months when Dad used his uniform against us. The scars remain. Trust develops gradually. Authority figures still make me nervous. But I've realized that true strength isn't about bearing abuse or remaining silent. It is about safeguarding those who are unable to defend themselves. Even when the entire world appears to be against you, even when the abuser wears a uniform and calls it love. This is the kind of knowledge that most adults never understand. And now this youngster is launching truth bombs left and right. 3 years after my sister defended my attacker, he struck again, at her own wedding. Now she's divorced, in therapy, and drowning in guilt. I've been with my partner for 6 years now since we first met. He's really close to my family and always shows up for our key events. My sister has been seeing her fiancé for 3 years, and they became engaged 8 months ago. She is the type of girl who has always wanted to be married. It didn't matter who proposed. She simply wanted to get married. In the beginning of her relationship, she duped me into going on a double date with her fiancé and his brother. She had stated that it was dinner with her and a buddy, but it was clearly not. The brother kept making unwanted advances at me the entire time, and I told him I had a partner, so the setting made me uncomfortable. During dinner, as I was using the restroom, the fiancé's brother followed me and attempted to touch me. I told my sister, but she sided with her fiancé's brother and refused to believe me. At their engagement party, my partner observed that the brother couldn't stop staring at me, so we did our best to avoid him. Every time I see this person, he acts strangely towards me. My sister wanted me, my twin, and 2 brothers to attend her wedding. The wedding is scheduled for next month, mid-June. My sister just told me that I'll be walking down the aisle beside her fiancé's brother. I told her he was making me uncomfortable, and he touched me. I mentioned that I expected I'd be walking with my brother. Apparently her fiancé insists on this, and she wants to make him happy. It seems strange to insist on something like that, and I'm sure it's a plot between the 2 brothers. My other siblings thought it was strange and expressed their concerns to our sister. She became agitated and said, "This is her wedding, and she'll do whatever she wants." I informed my boyfriend about this, and he was unhappy for me. He's confident enough in himself to know that this person will never be a competitor, but he understands how uncomfortable I feel in the circumstance. We had a family meal at my mother's house recently. I used this as an opportunity to bring up the aisle dilemma with my mother present. I refrained from discussing the touching because it happened a while ago. Besides, I'd already told my sister and hinted at it to my parents, but nothing was done. I just discussed the aisle situation. My sister became quite agitated and began crying, accusing me of attempting to destroy her marriage. I was perplexed, as did everyone else, and attempted to explain that he makes both me and my boyfriend quite uncomfortable. She then told me that I couldn't bring my boyfriend to her wedding anymore, and that if I did, I wouldn't be a bridesmaid. She gave no explanation for why I couldn't bring him, and my siblings were as furious, given that they prefer my boyfriend over my sister's fiancé. I thought I'd give her a few days to cool off and reconsider, but she hasn't changed her mind. My 20-year-old brother's girlfriend remains invited to the wedding. My partner is an amazing guy who has been nothing but nice and generous to my sister. His feelings are bruised, yet he still wants me to attend the wedding. I believe my sister is being unreasonable, and I will be quite upset at the wedding if my life partner is not present. I have no idea what to do, and my family is no help either. Julian, my twin brother, called me aside after dinner. He grasped my shoulders and stared me directly in the eyes. "This is ridiculous, Elena. Do you know that?" His hand shook slightly. "The way Sophie exploded like that. Something isn't right here." I nodded, wiping tears away with the back of my palm. My mother remained in the kitchen, purposefully clanging dishes louder than necessary. She always did this when she wanted to avoid conflict. My father had already retired to his study, mumbling something about needing to check emails. Nico, my youngest brother, kicked a dining room chair. "This is so..." My girlfriend Amelie is still invited, but Luca cannot attend. He's been around much longer than her fiancé. He slipped his hands into his pockets. "I'm calling Sophie out on this." "Don't," I replied hastily. "It'll just make things worse." But Nico had already pulled out his phone. I watched him typing furiously with his jaw gritted. Within seconds his phone vibrated. His expression hardened as he read the response. She says, "It's different because I'm in the wedding party and you're just a bridesmaid." He slammed his phone on the table. "Like that makes any sense." Julian went back and forth through the dining room. "We should talk to her together. All 3 of us make her see sense." I shake my head. "You didn't notice her expression when I brought it up. She looked at me as if I were an enemy." My voice cracked. "All I said was that Adrian makes me uncomfortable." "Adrian!" Julian spat out the name. "That is his name. The creep who refuses to leave you alone." I had not intended to utter his name, but it slipped out. I dropped into a chair, my legs suddenly weakening. At the engagement reception he kept making reasons to be near me. Luca noticed before I did. We spent half of the night dodging him. Nico threw his fist upon the table. "And now Sophie wants you to walk arm in arm with him while your actual boyfriend sits at home." My mother eventually came from the kitchen, dish towel in hand. She refused to meet my gaze. "Maybe you should just do what your sister asks, Elena. It's only a day." "Mom." Julian whirled on her. "Are you serious now?" She twisted the dish towel in her hands. "I just don't want to see the family torn apart over this." "The family is already being torn apart," Nico told me, "by Sophie and her insane demands." My phone vibrated. Luca's name appeared on screen. I responded quickly, anxious to hear his voice. "Hey," he said softly. "How did it go?" "Terribly." I stepped out onto the back porch for privacy. "She banned you from the wedding." Silence stretched between us. I could hear him breathing and absorbing the information. Eventually, he spoke. "Why don't you want to stroll with that guy?" "Because I dared to say it in front of our mother?" I sat on the porch steps, bringing my knees up to my chest. "Luca, I'm very sorry. This is quite unfair to you." Quit apologizing. This isn't your fault. His voice was calm, but I could hear the pain beneath. After 6 years together, you've decided not to invite me to your sister's wedding because you want to protect yourself from a predator. The word lingered in the air between us. Predator. We'd never said it out, but we both knew Adrian was like that. I don't know what to do, I admitted. Part of me wants to skip the whole thing, but then I'll be the sister who ruined Sophie's wedding. You wouldn't be ruining anything. She's doing that all on her own. Luca was silent. But I know how much your family means to you. If you need to go, I'll understand. Without you? Walk down that aisle with Adrian while you're sitting at home? My tone was raised. That's not happening. Then don't go, he replied simply. Elena, you've spent your whole life trying to keep peace in your family. Maybe it's time to choose yourself. After we hung up, I sat on the porch until the sun began to drop. Julian met me there carrying a blanket and 2 mugs of tea. I called Sophie, he continued, sitting alongside me. Tried to talk sense into her, and she hung up on me. He handed me a mug, but not before saying some horrible things about you. Trying to divert focus away from her big day. I laughed bitterly. By not wanting to be groped by her future brother-in-law? Julian's face clouded. Is that what happened? He actually touched you? I stared at my tea, watching the steam rise. 3 years ago, on that double date she duped me into, he followed me to the restroom and... I couldn't finish the statement. Jesus, Elena. Julian firmly laid down his mug. Sophie knows this? I told her that night. She said I must have misunderstood his intentions. The recollection lingered. Said Adrian told her I came on to him. That's complete. Julian stood up again, pacing. We need to tell Mom and Dad the whole story. I tried hints before, but they didn't want to hear it. I tightened the blanket around myself. Nobody wants to believe that Sophie's perfect wedding involves forcing me to walk with my assaulter. The word tasted odd in my mouth. Assaulter. But it is who he was. Over the next few days, my phone was inundated with texts. Extended family members immediately expressed their feelings regarding my selfishness. Sophie had apparently been calling everyone, portraying me as the monster who was jealous of her happiness. My aunt sent a text. Your sister only gets 1 wedding day. Can't you put aside your feelings for a few hours? My cousin left a message. I heard you're causing drama about the processional. That's pretty petty, Elena. Each message felt like an additional weight on my chest. I presented them to Luca when he arrived for supper. This is insane, he exclaimed, skimming through the texts. She's turned the entire family against you. Not everyone. I pointed to the living room where Julian and Nico were preparing a movie. The boys are on my side. 3 against the rest of the family. Luca put down my phone. Those aren't great odds. Nico heard and came over. Actually, I've been doing some digging. Amelie's cousin went to college with Adrian. She says he had a reputation for being handsy at parties. My stomach twisted. Of course he did. There's more, Nico added. Amelie heard from her cousin that Adrian's been telling people at their engagement parties that he and Elena have history. Luca's face became hard. He's telling people what? Yeah, apparently he makes it sound like they had a thing. Nico expressed distaste. Amelie didn't want to say anything before, but after what happened at dinner. She thought Elena should know. I felt nauseous. Adrian was fabricating a story in which we had agreed on something, laying the groundwork for further deception. I need to confront Sophie with this, I stated, standing up. No. Julian placed his hand on my shoulder. Let me and Nico do it. If it comes from you, she'll just say you're making things up. They departed that evening to go meet Sophie at her flat. I walked my living room as Luca attempted to divert me with work anecdotes. 2 hours later, my brothers returned, looking defeated. She wouldn't even let us in, Julian explained. Talked to us through the door chain. Nico hurled himself onto my couch. She said Adrian already told her about the history thing, claims you led him on at the double date, and now you're embarrassed about it. That's not what happened, I exclaimed, shocking myself with the volume. We know, Julian replied kindly. But she's choosing to believe him. Or at least pretend she does. Luca placed his arms around me as I started crying. Not soft tears, but angry, frustrated sobbing. 6 years of keeping the peace, swallowing my words to keep everyone pleased. And this is where it went. My telephone rang. Mom. Elena, you need to apologize to your sister, she stated without pause. This has gone too far. Apologize for what? I placed her on speaker for everyone to hear. For not wanting to walk with someone who assaulted me? Don't be dramatic. Your sister says it was a misunderstanding. Mom, he followed me into a restaurant bathroom and put his hands on me. That's not a misunderstanding. Silence. Then, that was 3 years ago, Elena. Can't you move past it for your sister's sake? I hung up. The next morning I received more texts. This time from Sophie herself. If you really cared about my happiness, you'd stop making this about you. Adrian is going to be family. You need to get over yourself. I can't believe you're trying to ruin my wedding over some supposed incident from years ago. That final one made me see crimson. A supposed event. I screenshotted each message and emailed it to my brothers. Within minutes they both called me. That's it, Julian said. I'm done trying to reason with her. Same, Nico said. If she wants to prioritize that creep over her own sister, that's on her. Despite their encouragement, I felt split. The wedding was 4 weeks away. RSVPs have been sent. My bridesmaid dress hung in my closet, a lavender memory of happier times when Sophie and I planned our ideal weddings together. Luca saw me gazing at the outfit one evening. You don't have to decide right now, he said me, throwing his arms around me from behind. The wedding is in 4 weeks, and you can decide on the morning of if you want. He kissed my temples. Whatever you choose, I support you. Even if I go without you? His arms tightened slightly. Even then though, I'd be lying if I said it wouldn't hurt. I turned into his arms to face him. It's not fair. You've been to every family Christmas, every birthday, every celebration for 6 years. You helped my dad fix the deck last summer. You taught Nico to drive stick shift, and now you're banned because I won't walk with someone who hurt me. Life isn't fair, he explained simply. But that doesn't mean you have to accept it. 3 weeks before the wedding, I made one final try. I texted Sophie and asked to meet for coffee, just the two of us. To my astonishment, she consented. We gathered at our old favorite cafe, where we used to study throughout college. She appeared exhausted, with worry reflected in the dark circles beneath her eyes. Planning a wedding is exhausting, she stated as a greeting. I nodded and ordered my normal latte. We sat in uneasy quiet until the drinks arrived. Sophie, I said softly. I need you to understand what Adrian did. Stop. She raised her hand. I don't want to hear another word about ancient history. 3 years isn't ancient history. It is when you're trying to destroy my relationship. Her voice increased, leading other customers to stare. Do you know what situation you're placing me in? My fiance's family already thinks you are tough because you refuse to give Adrian a chance. I've got a guy. Why should I give Adrian any chance? That's not the point. She fiercely swirled her coffee. The point is, you're making me choose between my sister and my future family. No, you're choosing between your sister's safety and your fiance's brother's feelings. I shifted my weight. He assaulted me, Sophie. He tells them that we have history. He stares at me at all family gatherings. And you want me to walk arm in arm with him while my real partner is prohibited from going. Luca is not banned, she stated politely. You're choosing to exclude him by being difficult about the processional. That's the same thing. She rose abruptly. I'm done talking about this. You have the option of being my bridesmaid and participating in the processional I have prepared, or staying at home. But quit attempting to manipulate me with your victim complex. She left me sitting there, my coffee getting cold and her words reverberating in my ears. Victim complex. That night, I made a decision. I called Luca first. He answered on the second ring, and I could hear his concern before I said anything. I'm done, I said, my voice unusually calm. I'm not going to the wedding. Are you sure? He inquired kindly. I don't want you to regret this later. The only thing I'd regret is walking down that aisle with Adrian while you're sitting at home. I held my phone more tightly. She described it as my victim complex. Can you believe it? Luca was silent for a bit. When he spoke, his voice was tense with repressed wrath. She's deceiving you. Do you know that? I knew. But seeing him say it aloud made it more real, and it stung more than I had anticipated. The next morning, I awoke to find Julian and Nico already in my apartment. They had let themselves in with the spare key and were preparing breakfast in my kitchen. We figured you might need moral support, Julian explained, cooking pancakes and food. Nico was swiping through his phone, his look becoming darker with each swipe. Sophie's been posting on social media about ungrateful family members trying to sabotage her happiness. She's not naming names, Julian said hastily, noticing my expression. But anyone who knows the situation knows she means you. I slid into a bar stool at my kitchen counter. I haven't even told her I'm not coming yet. She's preempting, Nico replied. Getting her version out there first. My phone vibrated. A text from my cousin Isabel. I saw Sophie's posts. What's actually going on? Before I could react, another text arrived, followed by another. Within minutes my phone was filled with messages from extended family members, all of whom wanted to know what was going on. Don't respond yet, Julian said, setting a plate of pancakes in front of me. Eat first, and then we'll figure out a strategy. But I could not eat. My stomach was knotted. 6 years of meticulously keeping family unity, and it was all coming apart because I refused to be partnered with my assaulter. That afternoon, my father finally called. I was wondering when he'd end his stillness. Your mother is very upset, he said, revealing everything I needed to know about where this talk was going. I'm upset too, Dad. He breathed deeply. Elena, I know this situation isn't ideal, but sometimes we have to make sacrifices for family. Sacrifices? My voice was filled with disbelief. Adrian sexually assaulted me, Dad. He followed me into the bathroom and placed his hands on me. That is not a sacrifice. That is asking me to accept abuse. That's a very serious accusation, he stated cautiously. This is not an accusation. This is what occurred. I was pacing with my free hand clenched into a fist. I informed Sophie immediately. I tried to tell you and Mom. Nobody wants to hear it. Your sister says you misunderstood. I didn't misunderstand him pressing me against a wall. I didn't misunderstand someone following me into a bathroom and grabbing me. I did not misinterpret having to physically shove him away and lock myself in a stall until he departed. Silence on the other end. Then why didn't you tell us this earlier? I tried, but every time I brought it up, you and Mom changed the subject, or Sophie interrupted to say I was being dramatic. Tears were spilling down my cheeks now. And now she wants me to link arms with him and smile while my boyfriend of 6 years sits at home. Maybe if you just talk to Adrian. I hung up with my father. I had never done that before. My hands were shaking. Julian, who had been listening from the couch, got up instantly. That is it. I am calling Dad myself. Don't, I whispered softly. It won't help. But Julian was already phoning. I listened to his side of the talk and watched his expression change from annoyed to furious. No, Dad, you listen to me, he responded, his tone absolutely calm. Elena's telling the truth. I've seen Adrian at every family gathering since. The way he looks at her and tries to approach her is predatory. And you're asking her not only to be near him, but to physically touch him in front of everyone she cares about. A pause, followed by, I don't care if it rocks the boat. Some boats should be rocked. He hung up and turned to me. Dad says I'm being influenced by your version of events. Nico hurled a pillow across the room, frustrated. This is insane. How come everyone is siding with Sophie and not listening to Elena? Because it's easier. I replied gently. It's easier to believe I'm being dramatic than to accept that Sophie is choosing her fiancé's family over her sister's safety. That evening, Luca arrived after work. He discovered me surrounded by printed screenshots of text messages, attempting to arrange them chronologically. What is all this? He asked, placing down his laptop bag. Evidence, I stated, in case I need to explain to people why I'm not at the wedding. He sat near me and picked up one of the papers. It was a screenshot of Sophie's text regarding my alleged encounter. You don't owe anyone an explanation, he remarked kindly. I know, but I also know how this family works. If I don't have receipts, I'll be painted as the sister who was jealous of Sophie's happiness and skipped her wedding out of spite. Luca drew me into his side. Have I told you lately how proud I am of you? For what? For causing family drama 4 weeks before my sister's wedding. For standing up for yourself. For refusing to be silenced. For choosing your safety over keeping the peace. He kissed the top of my head. I know how hard this is for you. The following few days were a whirl of family politics. Aunts and uncles called, each attempting to mediate. Most of them began with some variation of, and I am sure this is all a misunderstanding. My Aunt Helena was the absolute worst. Elena dear, you know how men can be. Sometimes they're just more affectionate than we're comfortable with. That doesn't make them bad people. He followed me into a bathroom, Aunt Helena. Well, maybe he just needed to use the facilities too. It was the women's bathroom. That briefly silenced her. Still, Is it worth missing your sister's wedding over something that happened years ago? I began keeping track of how many family members used the statement years ago, as if time had made assault acceptable. By day 3, I'd reached 14. Nico's girlfriend Amelie came by suddenly one afternoon. She appeared worried, fiddling with her car keys. "I need to tell you something," she said. "About Adrian." My stomach sank. "What about him?" "My cousin. The one who went to college with him." She reached out after Nico told me what was happening. Amelie sat down, still holding her keys. She said she didn't tell me everything before. "Adrian, he had to leave his fraternity junior year. There were multiple complaints from girls at parties." "Complaints about what?" I inquired, although I already knew the answer. "Inappropriate touching. Following girls who were trying to get away from him. One girl said he cornered her in a bathroom at a frat party." Amelie's gaze met mine. "Sound familiar?" I felt nauseous. "Did anything happen to him?" "The fraternity quietly removed him, but the school didn't take action because no one filed formal reports. The girls were all told it would be he said, she said, and Adrian's father apparently donated a lot to the school." "Of course he did," I said, laughing cruelly. "Let me guess. His family has money." Amelie nodded. "Old money. The kind that makes problems go away." After she departed, I sat with this newfound knowledge. Adrian wasn't just some creep who targeted me. He was a serial predator, shielded by wealth and position. My sister was marrying into that family. I called Julian immediately. "We need to tell Sophie about Adrian's history." "She won't believe it," he explained. "You know she won't. We have to try." So we did. Julian, Nico and I visited Sophie's place that evening. This time, she let us in, despite the fact that her fiancé was clearly present. "We have information about Adrian that you need to hear," Julian told you. Sophie's fiancé Luca tightened up immediately. "If this is another attempt to slander my brother—" "It's not slander if it's true," Nico interjected. "He was kicked out of his fraternity for assaulting multiple women." "That's a lie," Luca stated plainly. "Adrian left the fraternity because he was too busy with his studies." "Amelie's cousin was there," I explained. "She knows girls who filed complaints." Sophie laughed when she heard Amelie's cousin. "How convenient. A friend of a friend of a friend says something bad about Adrian just when Elena needs ammunition against him." "This isn't ammunition," I remarked, frustrated. "This is a pattern of behavior. He did to those girls exactly what he did to me." "What he allegedly did to you," Luca clarified. "Adrian told me what really happened that night. You came onto him. He politely declined because you had a boyfriend, and now you're embarrassed about it." "That's not what happened." I got up, my entire body trembling with wrath. "He followed me into the women's bathroom and grabbed me." "The women's bathroom?" Luca asked, smirking. "Adrian would never do that. He's too much of a gentleman." "Your brother is a predator," Julian stated bluntly. "And if you can't see that, get out," Sophie murmured gently. "All of you, get out of my home." "Sophie, please." I tried once more. "I'm your sister. Why would I lie about this?" She stared me directly in the eyes. "Because you've always been jealous of me. I'm younger, but I'm getting married first. I found someone who wants to build a life with me while you're still just dating after 6 years." The word struck me like a physical blow. "You think I'm making up sexual assault because I'm jealous that you're getting married? I think you're making a big deal out of nothing because you can't stand that my wedding isn't about you." She opened her flat door. "Leave and don't contact me again unless it's to apologize." We departed in startled silence. Nico punched the elevator wall, causing a minor damage. "She's lost her mind," he remarked. "Completely lost it." "She's in too deep," Julian remarked gently. "She's chosen her side, and now she has to defend it no matter what." That night I was unable to sleep. I kept reliving Sophie's statements, feeling jealous and making it about myself. Luca held me while I cried, not saying anything, just being present. The next morning I awoke to see my mother in the living room. Luca let her in on his way to work. "We need to talk," she said. I brewed coffee to keep my hands busy. When I sat down across from her, I observed she appeared older and exhausted. "Your father told me what you said about the bathroom." I waited, not trusting my ability to speak. "Why didn't you tell me?" she inquired, sounding genuinely interested for the first time. "I tried, Mom, but every time I brought up Adrian making me uncomfortable, you or Dad would change the subject, or Sophie would interrupt, or you'd tell me not to cause drama." She was silent for a long time. "I suppose we did do that," You suppose? I just wanted everyone to get along, she explained weakly. I thought if we didn't make a big deal out of it, it would go away. It doesn't go away, Mom. Adrian didn't go away. He kept staring, kept trying to get close to me, and now Sophie wants me to walk with him. And when I said no, she banned Luca from the wedding. She's under a lot of stress with the wedding planning. Stop. I raised my hand. Stop making excuses for her. She knows what Adrian did. She's choosing not to believe me. That's not stress. That's a choice. My mother twisted her wedding band around her finger, an anxious habit I inherited. So, you're really not going to the wedding? Would you go? If Dad was banned because you wouldn't walk with someone who assaulted you, would you go? She didn't respond, which was enough. After she went, I felt weary but strangely clearer than I had in weeks. The lines were drawn. I knew where everybody stood. Over the next week the family schism widened. Cousins picked sides. Aunts and uncles murmured during family gatherings that I no longer attended. Sophie resumed her social media campaign, blogging about toxic family members and the need of eliminating negativity. Isabel, my cousin who had texted earlier, came to see me. She was one of the few family members who hadn't taken sides yet. I need to hear your version, she stated simply. So I told her everything. The double date arrangement, the bathroom attack, Adrian looking at every family gathering, the engagement party where Luca and I spent the night avoiding him, Sophie's ultimatum, and everything else. Isabel burst into tears as I concluded. Elena, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. No one wants to have any idea, I told them. It's easier to believe I'm being difficult. I believe you, she replied firmly. And I'm not going to the wedding either. Isabel, no, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I have a daughter, Elena. She's only 4 now, but someday she'll be a young woman. How can I go to a wedding that celebrates silencing assault victims? What message does that send? Her support meant more to me than I could explain, but it also resulted in additional family conflict. Sophie called me screaming when she learned Isabel was boycotting the wedding. You're turning the whole family against me, she sobbed into the phone. This is supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and you're ruining it. I'm not doing anything, I explained, trying to remain cool. I told Isabel the truth when she asked. She made her own decision. The truth? Your version of the truth? You mean Adrian's a good guy? Luca says. Luca is his brother. Of course he's going to defend him. And you're my sister. You're supposed to defend me. I tried to, Sophie. I tried to protect you by telling you what kind of person Adrian is. You chose not to listen. She hung up on me. 3 weeks before the wedding, things became much more serious. Luca began phoning Julian at work and leaving messages about how I was ruining their family. He actually told Luca to control his girlfriend better. Luca explained, showing me the SMS messages. Like your property I'm supposed to manage, he exclaimed. I'm so sorry you're getting dragged into this, I told you. He clasped my face in his hands and said, Hey. We're a team. Your battles are my battles. Though, I have to say your future brother-in-law seems like a real piece of work. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree, apparently. Luca's jaws constricted. Has Adrian tried to contact you? No, thank God, though Nico said he saw him at the gym yesterday. Adrian made some comment about looking forward to the wedding. That's it. Luca took out his phone. I'm calling Julian back. This needs to stop. I listened as Luca gently but firmly informed Julian that any more contact from him or Adrian would result in legal action. The threat of attorneys seems to work. The calls ceased, but the familial pressure continued. Every day brought new attempts at reconciliation, but they all followed the same pattern. I must apologize. I should be a bigger person. I should think about Sophie's happiness. Nobody mentioned Sophie should think about my safety. Julian and Nico arranged an intervention 2 weeks before their wedding. They arrived at my apartment with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine. We've been thinking, Julian explained, unpacking the food. Maybe you should write Sophie a letter. Lay out everything one final time. Then at least you'll know you tried everything. What's the point? I inquired. She won't believe me. The point is your own peace of mind, Nico explained. Years from now, you'll know you gave her every chance to make this right. So I wrote a letter. It took me 4 days and several drafts. I explained everything. The attack, Adrian's persistent behavior, my attempts to resolve it discreetly, her failure to believe me, and the unfairness of banning Luca. What I said was this. I love you, Sophie. You're my sister, and that will never change. But I cannot and will not put myself in a position where I have to touch the man who assaulted me. I cannot celebrate while my partner of 6 years is excluded for the crime of supporting me. If you change your mind, even at the last minute, we'll be there. But I won't sacrifice my safety and self-respect for anyone, not even you. I emailed it to her email address and waited. The response arrived within hours. Not from Sophie, but from Luca's brother Adrian. Your sister showed me your manipulative letter. It's clear you're mentally unstable and determined to destroy our happiness. You're no longer welcome at our wedding or in our lives. Any further contact will be considered harassment. I stared at the email, reading it repeatedly. Sophie has already been assimilated into Luca's family. No longer an individual, but a member of a group that did not include me. That's it then, I said Luca, showing him the email. He read it, and his expression darkened. Mentally unstable. They're really going all in on the gaslighting. I'm done, I replied. And I intended it. I tried. My conscience is clear. The final week before the wedding felt unreal. Family members made last-ditch efforts to persuade me to reconsider my mind. My bridesmaid dress hung in my wardrobe like a ghost. Sophie blocked me on all social media, but Julian told me she was uploading beautiful wedding prep photographs as if nothing was wrong. 4 days before the wedding, my father made one final attempt. He arrived at my apartment alone, appearing uncomfortable. Your mother has no idea I am here, he said. Okay. I've been thinking about what you said about the bathroom. He was unable to meet my gaze. I believe you, Elena. The words should have meant something, but they were too late. But you still think I should go to the wedding? He exhaled. I think sometimes families have to work around difficult people. We don't have to like everyone, but we show up. Adrian isn't difficult, Dad. He's dangerous. And Sophie is choosing him over me. She's choosing her fiancé's family. It's not the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. I was too tired to be angry any longer. Dad, what would you do if someone hurt Mom? Would you just work around them? He did not respond, but his silence told volumes. After he went, I sat in my apartment, staring at the family photos on my wall, including Sophie and me at Christmas last year, laughing at something Julian had said. The 5 of us siblings attended our parents' anniversary party. Luca and I celebrated Thanksgiving with my entire family. Those moments felt like they were from another lifetime now. The night before the wedding, I couldn't get comfortable. Luca suggested we go out and do something to take my mind off things, but everywhere we went, I pondered what was going on at the rehearsal dinner that I was not attending. She made her choice, Luca softly reminded me as we strolled through the park. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. I know. It just hurts. I know it does. He squeezed my hand. But I'm proud of you for choosing yourself. My phone buzzed while we strolled. Nico texted, rehearsal was weird without you. Sophie had Luca's cousin step in as a bridesmaid. Mom cried. Dad seemed unhappy. Adrian joked that you were too delicate to fulfill wedding chores. I switched my phone off. Tomorrow, as Sophie walked down the aisle, I'd be anywhere but there. And for the first time since the mess began, I was positive I was making the proper decision. The morning of the wedding was dreary and drizzling, which seemed suitable. I awoke early, as if my body had not received the signal that I didn't need to be somewhere. Luca was already awake and preparing coffee in the kitchen. How are you feeling? Strange, I confessed. Like I should be somewhere else. You are exactly where you should be, he firmly stated, offering me a drink. My phone started buzzing at 7 a.m. Text messages from extended relatives wondering if I had changed my mind, if I was coming, and if there was still time to rectify this. I switched it off without responding. Julian and Nico arrived around 10 o'clock, dressed in groomsmen garb. They appeared attractive but uncomfortable. We wanted to see you before we went, Julian explained. Make sure you're okay. I'm okay, I said, mostly meaning it. You two look good. Feel like traitors, Nico mumbled, yanking on his tie. You're not traitors. You're brothers trying to support both sisters in an impossible situation. I hugged each of them. Go try to have fun. They departed reluctantly, and the apartment seemed too quiet. Luca suggested we go wherever, but I couldn't seem to get off the couch. I keep thinking about when we were kids, I confessed. Sophie and I used to plan our weddings together. We'd be each other's maids of honor. Our kids would grow up together. We had it all figured out. Life rarely goes according to our childhood plans, Luca explained gently. I know. I just never imagined it would go this wrong. Around noon, as I realized the ceremony was about to begin, I finally broke down. Luca held me while I grieved, grieving not just for the wedding I was missing, but also for the relationship with my sister, which would never repair. She chose him, I exclaimed. She chose a predator and his enabling family over her own sister. She chose the illusion of a perfect wedding over the reality of who she was marrying into. Luca corrects. And someday she'll have to face that reality. As it turned out, someday arrived sooner than anyone anticipated. The reception was scheduled for 3 p.m. I knew this since Nico texted me the timeline weeks ago, when we still assumed I'd be there. At 3:30 my phone rang. Julian. Elena, something happened. His speech was strained, barely heard above the background commotion. I sat up straighter. What's wrong? Adrian cornered one of the servers during cocktail hour. Luca's cousin Victor saw the whole thing. The girl was trying to get past him to the kitchen, and he blocked her path, put his hands on her waist. Julian dropped his voice. She's 20. The catering manager is threatening to pull his entire staff. My heart pounded. Where's Sophie? Getting her makeup touched up. She doesn't know yet. Luca is trying to smooth things over with the catering company, offering them more money to stay quiet. Of course he is. I grabbed Luca's hand. Is the server okay? Shaken up. Victor's girlfriend got her away from Adrian and took her outside. The girl's manager wants to call the police, but Luca is begging him not to. I heard shouts in the background. Julian cursed behind his breath. I have to go. The photographer just quit. Apparently Adrian made comments about her appearance when she was setting up earlier. The call went dead. Luca and I sat in startled silence. Nico called around 25 minutes later. You're not going to believe this. Isabel just caused a scene. Isabel's there? I thought she wasn't going. She came for the ceremony but skipped the cocktail hour. When she heard about the server, she stood up during Luca's father's toast and announced what Adrian did in front of everyone. I covered my lips with my hand. Oh God. Half the room is in chaos. Luca's mother is screaming at Isabel. Dad's trying to mediate. Mom's crying and Sophie. Nico sighed. Sophie slapped Isabel. She what? Slapped her right there in front of 180 guests. Then she grabbed the microphone and said anyone who believed Isabel's lies could leave. My phone beeped. Another call coming in. Nico, Julian's calling. I'll call you back. I switched over. Julian was breathing rapidly. Elena, it's getting worse. 3 of Luca's fraternity brothers just confronted Adrian about the server. Turns out they knew about his history at college. One of them, Marco Keller, said he's been waiting years to call Adrian out publicly. Where's security? There is no security. Sophie thought it was an unnecessary expense. He laughed angrily. The venue manager is threatening to shut the whole thing down. Guests are leaving in droves. I overheard a crash in the background. What was that? Adrian just shoved Marco Keller into the gift table. Nico's trying to break it up. I have to go help. The following hour was a haze of fragmentary updates. Isabel provided images of the mayhem, including upturned chairs, strewn centerpieces, and Sophie's mascara pouring down her cheeks as she yelled at departing guests. The catering staff had walked out. The DJ was loading his equipment. At 4:45 p.m., my father called. His voice sounded hollow. The wedding's over. The venue kicked everyone out. Dad, I'm so sorry. Are you? He seemed genuinely curious, not accusing. Because I'm starting to think you're the only one who saw this coming. Where's Sophie? Luca took her back to their hotel. She's not handling it well. Your mother went with them. He was grumbling. Elena, I owe you an apology. When Marco Keller told us about Adrian's college history, when that young server was crying, I kept thinking about you in that bathroom 3 years ago. It's too late for apologies, Dad. I know. I just needed to say it. After we hung up, I sat down on our couch with Luca to process everything. My phone kept buzzing with texts from family members who had witnessed the accident. Each account added additional information. Adrian appears to have propositioned 2 additional women throughout the reception. Luca attempted to physically block guests from leaving. Sophie had torn her dress while chasing after Isabel. That evening, Julian and Nico arrived. They were weary, even in their ragged groomsmen clothes. It was worse than we could tell you over the phone, Julian remarked, dropping on my couch. After the venue kicked us out, Adrian tried to follow that server to her car. Her manager had to physically restrain him while she drove away. Is she pressing charges? Luca inquired. Her manager wants her to, but she's scared. Adrian's family has money. Good lawyers. Nico unfastened his tie. Same old story. What about Sophie? The brothers exchanged looks. She's in denial, Julian finally said, blaming everyone but Adrian. Says Isabel ruined her wedding. The server was overreacting. The photographer was too sensitive. Luca is enabling it, Nico added. He's already spinning it as a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion. My phone rang, an unknown number. I almost didn't respond, but something made me pick up. Is this Elena? Said a young woman, anxious and apprehensive. Yes. Who's this? I'm Emily. I was the server at your sister's wedding today. Your cousin Isabel gave me your number. I hope that's okay. Of course. Are you all right? Her voice shook as she said, I'm trying to be. I wanted to thank you. Isabel told me about what happened to you. Why you weren't there. It helped to know I wasn't alone, that someone else understood. I'm so sorry this happened to you. My manager wants me to file a police report, but I'm scared. Adrian's brother already called the catering company, threatening to sue for defamation if I say anything publicly. That's witness intimidation, Luca stated loudly enough for her to hear. That's illegal. Emily asked, Who's that? My boyfriend. He's right. They can't threaten you for telling the truth. Would you? She paused. Would you come with me to file the report? I know we don't know each other, but Isabel said you'd understand. I looked at Luca, who nodded instantly. Of course. When? Tomorrow morning, the officer said 9 a.m. We'll be there. After she hung up, I sat back and felt the weight of the day. My sister's wedding had gone precisely as I had expected, but worse. Now, another young woman was suffering with Adrian's predatory conduct. You did the right thing, Luca remarked, understanding my expression. Not going today. I know. It just doesn't feel like winning. It's not about winning, Julian explained. It's about protecting yourself. The following morning, Luca and I met Emily at the police station. She was younger than I expected, maybe 20, and had tense hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Her manager, Victor, an older man, joined her. Adrian's lawyer has already called me 3 times, Victor informed us while Emily was presenting her statement. Offering money, threatening lawsuits, but I've been in this business 25 years. I'm not letting another creep get away with hurting one of my staff. The officer collecting the report was thorough, asking comprehensive questions about what happened. When Emily indicated that several witnesses had seen Adrian corner her, the officer's attention increased. Who else saw this? Luca's cousin, some fraternity brothers, the photographer who quit, Emily muttered. Emily stared at me and said, and apparently, he has a history of this behavior. I spent the following hour delivering my own statement on the restroom assault 3 years ago. It seemed odd to finally have someone in charge take it seriously. The officer made notes, asked follow-up questions, and treated it as a crime. As we were leaving, we came across Marco Keller in the parking lot. He had come to make his own statement about what he'd seen at the wedding. I should have said something years ago, he replied. When Adrian was doing this stuff in college, but we all just looked the other way. Figured it wasn't our problem. And now? I asked. Now I have a daughter. She's only 3. But someday. He shook his head. I can't be the guy who stayed silent anymore. Over the next few days, more stories surfaced. The photographer has filed her own complaint. 2 guests complained about Adrian's disrespectful statements. Isabel linked me with 3 women from Adrian's college who were finally willing to speak up. Luca's family attempted damage management. They produced remarks about misconceptions and overreactions, but the truth had gained momentum. The venue prohibited them from ever returning. The catering firm has blacklisted them. Wedding vendors throughout town issued warnings about the family. Sophie called me a week after the wedding for the first time since everything had fallen apart. Are you happy now? Her voice sounded rough from crying. My wedding is ruined, my reputation is destroyed, and it's all over social media. Sophie, no. You listen. Adrian made some mistakes, but you've blown this completely out of proportion. One incident 3 years ago. It wasn't one incident. You know that now. You saw what happened at your own wedding. That server was flirting with him. She was 20 and trying to do her job, just like I was trying to go to the bathroom when he cornered me. I maintained a consistent tone. And the photographer? The other guests who've come forward? Were they all flirting too? Silence. Later. Luca says his brother is just friendly. People misinterpret. Sophie, stop. Please. You know the truth. You've always known. I have to leave. Her voice sounded quiet. Luca's calling me. She hung up. It would be the last time we talked for months. The legal process progressed slowly. Adrian engaged expensive lawyers who did everything to get the accusations dropped. But Amelie remained resolute, backed by the other women who had come forward. I attended each hearing, sitting in the gallery with Luca and my brothers. Of course, Luca supported Adrian by paying his bail, hiring his lawyers, and posting on social media about his brother's bogus accusation. Sophie repeated every phrase, criticizing anyone who dared to speak against her brother-in-law. 4 months later, on a Tuesday afternoon, Julian called me at work. Sophie left Luca. I almost dropped my phone. What? She showed up at Mom and Dad's an hour ago with 2 suitcases. Won't say what happened, but she's been crying non-stop. Did she say anything about? No. Nothing about you or the wedding or any of it. She just keeps saying she needs to stay there for a while. I wanted to feel vindicated, but instead I felt sad. Is she okay? Physically, yes. Emotionally, I don't think she's been okay for a while. That evening my mother called. I know you and Sophie aren't speaking, but I thought you should know she's home, she whispered quietly. Julian informed me. Elena. She paused, selecting her words carefully. She found messages on Luca's phone. He's been covering for Adrian for years, paying off women, threatening witnesses. She found receipts for payments to 3 different women from before they even met. So she finally believes Adrian's a predator. She found photos. My mom's voice broke. Photos Adrian had taken of women without their consent, including, her breath caught, including one of you from the engagement party. You didn't even know he was taking it. I slid into my bed feeling terrible. He had photos of me? Luca had been keeping them on his phone as insurance, in case you ever went public with the assault. Oh God! There's more, my mother added. Sophie found messages between the brothers from right after your wedding confrontation. Adrian was bragging about how he'd finally get to touch you during the processional. Luca was encouraging him. I could not talk. Luca took the phone from me and gently spoke with my mother while I pondered the information. What had my sister's fiancé and his brother been planning? What if I had walked down the aisle with Adrian? 3 days later, a letter appeared in Sophie's handwriting. Elena, I'm not sure where to begin with this. I'm sorry doesn't seem appropriate. I knew it was too difficult to express. But both are correct. I apologize. I knew when you told me about the restroom. Adrian always observed you during family gatherings, and I knew when I told you to walk with him. I knew. I picked my fairy tale above my sister. Luca showed me the images Adrian had taken of you. I laughed about them. Said it demonstrated your want for attention. That's when I realized what I'd been ignoring. What you and everyone else were trying to tell me. I am not asking for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I know now. I had always known. I was just too cowardly to admit it. I'm getting divorced. I am in treatment. I'm trying to figure out how I became someone who would sacrifice my sister for a wedding. You were correct about everything. I'm sorry I didn't listen. Sophia. I read the letter 3 times before presenting it to Luca. He held me as I cried, not joyful or sad tears, but tears of relief. Are you going to respond? He inquired. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I don't know. Whatever you decide, I'm here. The following few months were a whirl of legal proceedings and family dynamics. Adrian eventually pleaded guilty to lesser charges in order to avoid a trial, which included 8 months of probation, obligatory counseling, and a restraining order prohibiting him from contacting Amélie or me. Not enough, but something. Luca divorced Sophie as she refused to continue supporting Adrian. He attempted to force her to pay for the cancelled wedding, but her lawyer immediately shut that down. Sophie had also saved receipts for every threat, payoff, and cover-up the brothers had organized. I did not contact Sophie at this period, neither did she. Beyond that one letter, we were in parallel orbits, each healing independently from the tragedy of that connection. Julian broke the impasse. She asks about you, he stated over one of our frequent dinners. Every time I see her, what does she want to know? If you're okay. If you're happy. If you'll ever forgive her. I don't know if I can. I acknowledged. She knew Adrian assaulted me and still tried to force me to touch him. How do you forgive that? You don't have to, Luca replied. Forgiveness isn't mandatory. But as time passed, I began to think of Sophie differently. With empathy rather than rage. She had been so desperate for her fairy tale wedding that she had traded everything real for something unreal. She'd lost her sister, split her family, and married a man who helped his brother prey on women. A year after the wedding, I finally replied to her letter. Only one line. I am delighted you are getting help. She did not respond, but Julian informed me she cried when she read it. Life moved forward. Luca and I got engaged with a modest proposal at home. There's no need for huge gestures. We planned a small wedding for our closest family and friends. No large bridal parties, no forced pairings, and no drama. When it came time to send out invites, I glanced at Sophie's name on my list for a long time. Luca discovered me there, pen hovering over the envelope. You don't have to invite her, he replied. No one would blame you. I know. I set down the pen. I'm not ready. Maybe I'll never be ready. That's okay too. We married 6 months later, in a tiny ceremony in my parents' backyard. Julian was Luca's best man. Nico walked me down the aisle. My parents cried. Isabel delivered a great reading about choosing love over fear. Sophie wasn't present, but she sent a card. I wish you all the happiness I almost stole from you. May your marriage be founded on facts, not fairy tales, with love and regret. Sophia. I kept the card but did not react. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. But maybe that is acceptable. Perhaps the lesson is not about forgiveness or reconciliation. Perhaps it's about learning to choose yourself, even if it means sacrificing everything, perhaps especially then.